I'm not watching it. It's too scary. All right, we're watching boring communism talks.
Finance minister, he was looking at me with, eyes that felt like laser beams. And he gets the floor and he said, one sentence, which is the one that I'm going to leave you with. Elections cannot be allowed to change economic policy.
Ooh, tiramisu cake.
Got it?
Wait, do we have a chud? I mean, sometimes we have chuds. I tend to be very accepting of chuds, to be honest with you. Because I wanna win them over with my brilliant ideas, because my ideas are better than anything they offer people. Have you guys ever talked with the chud before? Chuds are like the best they have to offer. A chud's like a chud is basically a reference to a movie about cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers. And it's a word to call Republicans or conservatives. But basically, I want to win them over, because when conservatives come in here, the best they can offer is like, no, you don't deserve human rights. No, you don't deserve things from the government. No, we should give our money to international corporations. No, what? No. Yeah, like, nothing that they have betters anybody's life at all. At all. I like Alex Jones, bros. I don't know. I was watching Alex Jones earlier today. It's fashy AF. All right.
My response was, this is excellent news to the Chinese Communist Party, because they believe that too. And I then came up with a proposal. This is why they hated me. I was very moderate and said, in that case, Wolfgang, let's ban elections in bankrupt countries. Let's come out and declare that in the European Union, you can only have democracy if you're a creditor country. If you're a debtor country, no democracy. Elections cannot be allowed to change anything, because we have a loan agreement. We have a debtor's prison. Let's put Greece in the workhouse. I didn't say all these things, but I did say the thing about the Chinese Communist Party.
I like this Minecraft music.
And I quote from his preface, "I've always believed that if you're not able to explain the economy in a language which young people can understand, then you're clueless yourself." This from its author, Yanis Varoufakis, a man not only known not to mince his words, but one who in fact wrote the book in Greek in 9 days. I'm Mary Stack, the director of Cambridge Forum, and tonight to assist us in navigating the murky waters of capitalism, and to quote Yanis, come to terms with the beast that dominates our lives. We are privileged to have the best...
Guys, you can tell she has a very high power level because of all these beads around her neck. It means that she has achieved true enlightenment. Like that Street Fighter character, okay? You know, she just needs to take those off. They're like weighted training clothes. She drops them on the ground. A poof of dust comes up. You know? That's when you know that her true power level... Yes, she's Dalsim, guys. Dalsim student. Those are the trapped souls of the poors? Oh, no.
...of teachers. A philosopher and international economist, Yanis Varoufakis.
And I'm very much looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have. But I've been asked to give a presentation, so I will. Because sometimes I like to do as I'm told, not very often. The title that has been advertised, and some of you saw it outside and walked in, so I might as well honor the title, is a question. Is capitalism devouring democracy? Allow me to begin with a slightly different question. Have you noticed how in the last few decades the quality of politicians has tumbled? Not just in this country, everywhere. For God's sakes, even I became a politician in 2015. No, but seriously, there is a marked diminution in the rhetoric, in the capacity of politicians to inspire, and indeed in the power that they have. Now, I don't believe that this is due to a degeneration of the DNA of humanity or of those who are interested in politics.
Yes, bring those days
what
back,
we have
please.
been observing is the shrinking of what I shall refer to as the political sphere. There used to be a time before capitalism when there was one sphere, the sphere of power. It was impossible to separate economic power from political power. The king had He had military power produced political power, and political power and economic power were one and the same thing. There is no great mystery, really, as to why there was no economics 150 years ago. Think about it. Harvard University did not have an economics department in the 19th century. Why? Because there was no need for it before capitalism came of age. Before capitalism, the political and the economic sphere were one. It was only with the enclosures in Britain that you had a remarkable transformation of society, that great transformation. The shifting from feudalism to capitalism. Effectively, the peasants were evicted from the land, replaced by sheep, because of the international trade routes that were creating an international market for wool, and some commodities like wool, like steel, like
wool,
spices and so on, were emerging as international commodities with prices that were determined at the level of the international trade route system. And all the other commodities were goods, were effectively sidelined. So the lord of the land in Yorkshire or in Manchester had absolutely no incentive to retain those peasants planting idiotic little...
Exactly, Miss Parakeet. You know, we might not know how this information might be useful to us, but I think understanding the systems that oppress us is key to knowing how we can best dismantle them, you know? So let's learn the internal mechanisms of what locks us down into place in society, you know?
Vegetables, when they could just chuck them out.
Well, okay, you know what? You might be talking about the sword thing, but like, I'm still talking these are high-level ideas, guys. This is Dave Rubin level ideas, okay? And those are the highest level ideas there are.
Out of the land, replace them with fat sheep, whose wool suddenly had an international exchange value. But the enclosures created the working class. It created the commodification of labor.
I wish I was a bit
Up until then, people worked very hard, but they didn't sell their labor. We had a very interesting reversal of the timing of economic production and distribution. Under feudalism, we had work, production first. People actually toiled, they worked the land, and they produced the harvest. Production came first. Then came distribution. The lord of the land, or the manor or whatever, would send the sheriff in and take his cut from the harvest. How much he would take and how much he would leave behind was a political issue. It had to do with military power. It had to do even with the benevolence of the Lord. It had to do with the extent to which the Lord needed to keep the peasants on side in case another lord tried to usurp his property rights over the land. It was a political, diplomatic, ethical, religious, economic process that determined distribution after production. And then finally, the surplus that the lord amassed was sold in nearby markets, and that created a financial surplus for the lord, which then he lent out. So we had production, distribution, and then finally, finance. But with the enclosures and the eviction of the peasantry, we had the exact opposite. Because suddenly, the last thing that lords wanted to do is to work or to be entrepreneurial. So the replacement of the peasants with the sheep meant that suddenly every acre of land had an economic value, an exchange value, a price that did not exist. That was not the case before. Why did it acquire this price? Because you knew how many sheep you could raise on an acre. You know how much, more or less, wool you would produce. International markets were providing the equilibrium price of the wool, so you knew how much exchange value, money, you could gather per acre of your land. And of course, then, once that price was established, that exchange value per acre was established, suddenly land became a commodity, to be rented out, to be sold, to be purchased. There was no real estate market before that. Land was either you inherited land, in which case you had it, and if you never inherited land, you never got it.
Learning about this stuff.
And the only way of effectively getting land that you didn't have was through war, through conquest, or if the king decided to grant you a plot of land. There was no such thing as a market for land, and there was no such thing as a market of labor. The enclosures, the eviction of the peasants created land as a commodity, and of course labor as a commodity, because the evicted peasants,
oh yeah, Mark Blythe
they were roaming around the country, knocking on doors, saying, "I will do anything for work, for a piece of bread." That's the first labor market. That had never happened before in the history of humanity. People with nothing selling their labor time. That's the beginning of capitalism. But with this, you have the separation of the economic from the political sphere for the first time in our history as a species. Because suddenly you had merchants who acquired huge power through the accumulation of financial surpluses. Because the internationalization of those trade routes, the emergence of these few commodities as international commodities that bestowed substantial financial surplus upon those who handled them, whether they were the merchants, the ship owners, or the lords of the land, whose land now was used in order to cultivate, in inverted commas, wool. For the first time, you had this separation. You had lords whose political power and social power was now becoming increasingly disproportional to their economic power. You had
By the way, I just want to say that I'm surprised so many of you are sticking with me on this, but I appreciate it very much. And I think you're all extremely rad for learning alongside with me.
those dirty merchants, as they consider them, the riffraff, the ugly, dirty merchants, acquiring huge quantities of economic power that had nothing to do with their social status. They were not allowed in the palace. They were not allowed in parliament. They were not allowed in the gentlemen's clubs in London. And suddenly they had a lot more economic power than the lords. So the economic and the political sphere separated. And with industrialization, you throw into this mix James Watt's great invention, the steam engine, and this process just goes berserk. And you have globalization, which Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels in the manifesto described in the most poetic language when they say that capital must nestle everywhere, it must settle everywhere, it must enter into relations everywhere. And it was interesting because when Marx and Engels were writing that, it hadn't happened yet. But they foresaw the process that we live in, globalization. And with globalization now, we have, well, with this...
Well, and guys, this is something that I've talked a lot about on my channel, because you have constant conspiracy mongering about people from the Alex Jones types and the fringe right, or even the mainstream conservatives now talking about globalism or the globalists. The globalists are coming. The globalist left. But globalists aren't a thing. They're capitalists. These are people motivated by capitalism to do business in other countries. That's all it is. That's all it is. It's capitalism around the world. It's capitalism outside of the nation state. Wasn't globalists a slang for Jews back in the day, though? Yep. Yep. As the right is with everything, all they do is project their flaws. True. Yep. Jim Sock. Absolutely true. Yeah. This is something that I talk about all the time. And it's not, like, I just need to make it clear. It's not me saying it. It is, like, just an objective fact if you are an economist. There's no such thing as a globalist. They're just capitalists. They're just capitalists.
Process of globalization, you have the establishment of these completely separate two spheres. Now, interestingly, in the 19th century, you will recall this. Well, you live in a very historic town. Liberalism was
What are we fight for? Who are
a philosophy,
we? Let's
a
fight
political
capitalism.
philosophy at odds with democracy. To be a liberal, a genuine liberal, you must have been very skeptical about democracy, if not completely and utterly anti-democratic. The whole point about liberalism was how to preserve the right to track, barter, and exchange, in Adam Smith's famous expression, which was a right that
Evolve
many of the
capitalism
liberals,
into
including John
socialism.
Stuart Mill,
It's like
a very
Pokemon.
liberal person, a very progressive person for his age, he considered the idea of democracy. What is democracy? It's the rule of the many, to be a great impediment, if not a great threat, to liberalism. So this, when we talk about liberal democracy today, we're talking about something that in the 19th century was a contradiction in terms. To be a liberal meant that you did not believe in democracy. Yeah? Now, what was it that brought about a change, a transformation? Suddenly, liberals started embracing the idea of democracy. It was economic crisis, financial and economic crisis, beginning especially in this country, but also in Europe in the 1840s. Because the moment capitalism started turbocharging itself with the creation of what I will describe as networked companies, with the advances in electromagnetism, with, electric engines, the telegraph, all the communication technology, electricity grids. When electricity comes into production and we move beyond steam, that's
Rain, stay insane? What do you want to debate about? What would you like to debate about, Rain, stay insane? The Geek of Mabon.
the second industrial revolution. To create, when Edison created his empire, he created an...
If socialism lets you keep your guns, you don't give a fuck. Guess what? Socialism lets you keep your guns. Don't need the government giving me free stuff so they can control me. They're not giving you free stuff. They're giving you the stuff that they paid for, that you paid for. You pay the government, right? Wouldn't you prefer to get something out of paying the government with your taxes? I know I would. Oh, wait, never socialism. You just want to give the government money and not get anything for that money? Okay, I mean, I guess you can have that backwards view on society. That's fine. You want to debate the gender pay gap? I mean, maybe it's... Why didn't you just bring that up last time you were on? Why didn't you bring that up when you were on? I have an hour and 48 minutes of this to go through. Let's watch the video. Okay, guys, I'm gonna run a poll, okay? All right, we're gonna have a poll. Debate or video? All right. There you go. You guys have a poll. You guys get to vote in the poll. This will determine your fate, okay? We're a democracy here. We're a democracy. The polls are wrong. Fun fact, any Twitch user can do their own stream. True. This is actually true. Any of you could make a stream. We need observers. True. True. The polls are rigged by me. Yes, your votes are all worth 1. My vote is worth 10 million. Democratize your workplace. What's the poll? Debate or video? Wow, overwhelming amount of votes for the video. Overwhelming. 79 to 21%. Jeez. All right, we're doing the video. Venezuelans rigged voting. Oh yeah, I forgot, guys. The 2 Venezuelans are domineering our entire election.
A networked company. Remember, from the electric bulb to the power generating station, to the grid, everything was part of this. We talk about Google now and Apple as being mega companies. Well, the mega company was invented with the second industrial revolution. But think about it. To set up a company like Edison's, or later Henry Ford's, and so on, you needed a lot of financing. You needed a lot of money. So suddenly, the new reversed order becomes very significant, because now, ever since the peasants were thrown out of the land, ever since the enclosures in Britain, the Lord rented out, or leased out, an acre.
Never socialism. I don't think that governors are literally telling you to wear a mask in your own house. I think if you're in your own house, you're good. I think you're okay if you're in your house.
Or a few acres to an ex-peasant and said, okay, I will charge you rent, you raise the sheep here, and
yeah,
you keep the difference.
Never socialism. How about this? If you know what, link one of my mods, proof of your claim. I would very much love to see it. I'm sure everyone else in this Discord or in this Twitch channel would love to see it as well. Just so we know if we're breaking the law by not wearing masks in our houses. Governor of CA and PA, well, then it should be very easy for you to find a link to send to one of my mods.
The residual payments. So once you pay for the land, me, once you pay the workers, the ones that have been expelled and now are working for a piece of bread, subsistence wages, once you pay for the sheep, for the shearing scissors, whatever it is that you're using, your capital equipment, what you keep in the end is yours, is your profit. So suddenly these proto-entrepreneurs were forced, they didn't choose to do it, they were forced to become entrepreneurs. But how do you become an entrepreneur? First, you borrow. And usually you borrow it from the landlord. The landlord lends you the money to pay him rent, with interest. So you see the reversal? Instead of finance coming at the end, we used to have production, then exchange or distribution, and then finally finance. Now we have finance first. First, at the beginning, there was the loan. Once the loan comes in, you hire the workers, you pay the rent. Immediately you have distribution. So you have finance first, distribution second. The last thing that happens is production. So finance suddenly acquires a very special place in capital.
Yeah, I've heard of this guy before, but I've never actually, Never Socialism, whisper it to a mod, one of the mods. I've heard of him before, but I've never actually watched any of his talks. This has been really interesting so far. And I'm one of those nerds. I like watching, like, economists and listening to economists talk about money and, like, economic systems. And so far, everything he's saying sounds pretty based and accurate to me.
Capitalism. Now, the beauty and ugliness of finance, of banking, is that it is a magical process. Because once we move from the landlord to Edison and Henry Ford, it is impossible to finance capitalism simply by the accumulated wealth of some rich person like the Lord. Yeah. There was never enough money in the hands of any financier to provide Edison with the capital, with the money he needed in order to set up his networked firm. So you needed banks to conjure up money from nothing. And this is how finance has been working ever since the Second Industrial Revolution. How? By creating money from thin air. There is a common fallacy in the popular culture that we live in, that banks operate like vaults, whereby you and I put our savings in, and somebody else goes to the bank and borrows money that comes from our savings, and that the banker makes a profit as a result of the difference between the interest rate that he pays us for depositing our money into his vault and the interest rate that he charges the person that has borrowed money in order to invest in a shop, in a factory, whatever. That is not what is going on. If you go to the bank tomorrow morning and you get a loan from the bank, the money is going to come out of thin air. The bank will create it out of nothing. It's really very simple. You get $100,000 to buy a house, to buy whatever, to invest in a business. What will happen is somebody's going to type 100,000, 100,000 into your bank account. So it's conjured up. The ancient Greeks had a word for money, nomisma, or coin, which comes from the verb nomizo, which means to imagine. So Aristotle defined the value of money as a common fiction since the ancient times. This is exactly what it is. So the banker simply types the money in there. You put your card in the ATM, and suddenly, you have 100,000. Somebody typed 100,000 on the on the system. And then what you can do is you can use web banking. You can wire the money. If you buy a car or a house, it goes to the bank account of the vendor. If you invest in a shop, it goes to the landlord, to another bank account, with the same banking system. It doesn't matter whether it's the same bank or not. So these digits that were typed into your account simply are transferred to another account. That's all that happens. Now, the hope of the banker is
same omni-slap,
that you are going to use this money productively, you're going to earn money from that, and then you will give the banker the money that will effectively tie up that loose end with interest. Now, to the extent that this works, and it really works magnificently, in my book I relate this in the form of a metaphor, a science fiction metaphor. It's a bit like a banker being the specially gifted magician who has a very long arm and can push his arm, it's usually a he, so allow me not to say she or he, right? Through the timeline. He pushes his hand into the future, grabs value that has not been created yet, brings it, snatches it from the future, brings it into the present, and gives it to you. Hopefully, you do productive things, and you create the value that will repay the future. This is my preferred metaphor for what bankers do. But once they learn the beauty and the...
Okay, well, so we have been presented with this article from Pennsylvania, which, oh my gosh, PA governor announces new COVID rules, including wearing a mask in your house. It appears that never socialism is correct. However, let's get some clarity here. Strengthening masking order. Masks are still required indoors. Masks now required anytime you're with people outside of your household, even if you're socially distant. Applies to all indoor facilities, plus if you have people in your home not part of your household. So, yeah, you do have to wear a mask inside of your own home. If there are people from outside of your home in it. Kind of an important caveat here. Kind of an important caveat.
the glory of doing this, and they are privileged, in a privileged spot, because they can take value from the future, bring it to the present. They don't do any work themselves. And because they are the mediators between future and present value, they're ultra-rich, and not only ultra-rich, but central in societal processes, political processes. Yeah? So if you do this...
Okay, never socialism, I admit that I am wrong, but also I need to admit that you are also misrepresenting the content of the order, which makes it seem as if the order is you have to wear a mask inside of your own home for no reason, and that's not the case. Not the case at all. But I admit, you, in a very technical sense, you done got me. You done got me, okay? One point for never socialism. Is the government going to pay my mortgage? Like, are you asking, like, right now? Probably not. Also, probably not under market socialism either.
And it works. Why not do more of it? Keep snatching more value from the future and bring...
They wouldn't be well, okay, never socialism. Do you know what socialism means? Because, like, no one's going to tell you what to do with your house. If anything, you would just be not having to pay for electricity or water or internet, or basic food stuff. And you'd have healthcare and mental health care and the ability to get an education if you want. But no one's going to tell you fuck all to do with your house. What form of socialism do I subscribe to? I subscribe to market socialism. So my basic idea is decommodifying a significant portion of the economy, specifically things that people need in order to live a baseline life. So housing, water, food, education, electricity, internet, healthcare, mental health care, stuff like that. And basically the things you need in order to live and function in a modern society. And on top of that, we should shift over time towards a market socialism society. And by that, I mean we adopt worker co-ops as the predominant model of production. And essentially, worker co-ops are just traditional business structures that are collectively owned by the workers. So instead of, like, shareholders dictating, like, what these companies do, it's the workers at the company dictating what should be done with the profits. And so everyone gets to share in the profits of the company. And you'd have systems like providing federal loans to people who want to start up worker co-ops specifically. And probably whenever the government has to step in and bail out a private company, that private company should be required to become a worker co-op. But when I say we decommodify housing, I'm not saying we come and we take all housing from everybody. What I mean is we build housing that is available for free to anyone who needs it. It might not be the best housing, but it's a place you can live instead of out on the street, and you can live there for free. But there would still be the incentive of like going out to better your quality of life. This is why you would go out and get a job, right? Or you want to serve your community, or you are just curious. Maybe you just want an education so you can find out what's out there in the universe, better understand society, yeah, essentially there would still be houses out there if you want to work and be able to afford a standalone house with a white picket fence and a dog. No one's stopping you from doing that. No one's no one's going to come and pay your mortgage off for you. So again, this is just like, yeah, we should house homeless people. Yeah. People would like to barter for better locations. You can't socialize being next to the water. I'm not entirely sure what that means. The government would be handling like water treatment and like water distribution, which is what it largely does in a lot of places already. It would just be preventing companies from coming in and buying up water sources and then privatizing it and selling it for profit. Anyway.
Bringing it to the present, and more and more. At some point, the present can no longer produce the value that it needs to produce in order to repay the present. And at that point,
all I'm saying is, I like
suddenly,
your ideas, and I like you, Bmore.
Those of us who have borrowed money,
I think I can win you over.
or some of us, have no capacity to repay it. A recession begins.
Yeah, exactly. Like how Tool says, if we didn't have a profit motive attached to water, cases like Flint never would have happened. But people would be willing to be in nicer locations, or willing to pay to be in nicer locations, yeah. Or have higher quality of housing, or, you know, gotta go work at the worker co-op to save up for the PS6, or, you know, whatever new book or game or movies coming out. Yeah, I mean, it would basically be functioning like it is now, except you wouldn't have to pay for electricity or water, you know? You'd actually be getting something for paying your taxes.
People that work for us lose their jobs, they cannot repay their own loans, and then suddenly the book of the bank is full of loans that are non-performing. At that point, if you and I, or those of us who have some money in the bank, realize that this is happening, we panic, we rush to the bank, this is a bank run, we ask for the cash is not there. And then you have the financial crisis that we had in this country and in Europe from the 1840s onwards. Now, to a very large extent, the United States of America, the way you understand your own country now, is the product of their political response to a sequence of financial crises beginning from the 1840s. Even the creation of the Federal Reserve in the beginning of the 20th century was a result of J.P. Morgan saying,
I mean, never socialism. I'm literally a socialist. We don't want to destroy small businesses. We actually want to empower them and make it so that there are more small businesses. That's actually what we want. Yeah. Basically, the business model that I want people to adopt is actually more efficient than private businesses. So, yeah, we'd empower them, yeah. But yeah, socialism, yeah, like the never socialism, the lockdowns are meant to keep people alive. It's kind of an extenuating circumstance of like a historic pandemic that's killed 250,000 people so far. But also, yeah, socialists aren't liberals. Well, yeah, people are alive, yes. This is true. We haven't all died yet. This is true. I don't even know what to do with that argument. I don't know what to do with that argument. Or maybe we have all died. Maybe this is hell. We died and went to hell collectively, guys. The rapture has happened. We've all been sent into the bad place, okay? Are we in a simulation? Maybe.
I've had enough of bailing out my mates. Let's create a Federal Reserve that is going to be doing their job. And of course, he created it. And it was all stitched up amongst the bankers. Think of all the great institutions of this country, like Social Security, food stamps. They're the result of 1929. It's what brought this nation together, what created the United States of America the way you understand it.
True.
It's a sequence of financial collapses that puts together nations.
This guy is spitting a lot of truth right now. So I know chat is very interesting, but I hope you were all paying attention to what he just said.
And polities and democratic processes. So the
things we associate with America right now, the things that make America great at the current time, are all dimmed versions of socialist policies from the 1920s. Also, Justin Freakin, thank you very much for the follow. I appreciate it very much. Guys, we're two followers away from we're one follower away from 750 followers, and I'm very excited.
Let me go back to the beginning. We used to have one sphere
Justin Freakin,
of
we
power.
are indeed friends right now.
It was...
Oh, and also anyone new who wants to join the Riverboat Gang, please join the Discord, okay? We're very nice over there. We post pet pics, and after this video's done, we're going to go through some of the pet pics, okay?
Political, economic, cultural, military. Power had many different facets, but it was one sphere in which it emerged from. Then it separated into two spheres.
Welcome, comrades.
The political sphere and the economic sphere. And as it did, the political sphere was increasingly democratized. Why? Because all the important decisions were moving to the economic sphere. So legitimacy, political legitimacy, and the capacity of the regime, of the system that we live in, to maintain itself and to be sustainable through the common belief amongst the people that this is a legitimate system, was based on democratization, of giving people the idea that they had control over their communities, the nation, their politics. But this democratization was only accepted by the proponents of liberalism to the extent that all the important decisions were migrating from the political sphere as the political sphere was democratized. Women understand that. It's like, you know, the feminization of certain professions. When women moved into teaching, teaching lost its power. When they moved into health, in Greece now, a majority of judges are women. And you should see the judicial system collapsing. So it's a very, very similar process that we see. Power is migrating from the economic sphere to the political sphere, and the political sphere is democratized. Increasingly. Now, something fundamental happened beginning in this country in the 1970s. After the end of Bretton Woods, which was what? What was Bretton Woods? Let's not get complicated. It was the globalization of the New Deal. Roosevelt's New Deal in 1933, which was, what was the basic idea? To put the financial genie, the banking genie back into its bottle.
Supreme comfort, thank you very much.
To make banking boring, effectively to ban bankers from doing things that...
Wait, I'm going to back it up.
The political sphere was democratized. Women understand that. It's like, you know, the feminization of certain professions. When women moved into teaching, teaching lost its power. When they moved into health, in Greece now, a majority of judges are women. And you should see the judicial system collapsing. So it's a very, very similar process that we see. Power is migrating from the economic sphere to the political sphere, and the political sphere is democratized. Increasingly. Now, something fundamental...
I think what he is saying that, yeah, Miss Parakeet already has it. What he's saying is that women moving into professions typically makes them less powerful because we put less value on women's labor in society. So that's what he's saying. He's saying the way we treat women in society is so shitty that it's basically, you can use it as kind of like a way of tracking the shift of power. Kind of like how originally programmers were women, because men, like the manly profession, was creating computer hardware. And then over time, programmers became dominated by men as men slowly moved into the field, and it gained more prestige, more power in society. And yeah, women were kind of forced out of those professions, and they, like, even in like the 1990s, you can remember like video game commercials were largely targeting young boys and not women, even though women were highly involved in the field. True. One of our mods helped build the internet. It's true. It's true. Yeah, exactly. They had women called computers. Yep, exactly, Holsky.
Happened beginning in this country in the 1970s. After the end of Bretton Woods, which was what? What was Bretton Woods? Let's not get complicated. It was the globalization of the New Deal. Roosevelt's New Deal in 1933, which was, what was the basic
Y'all are
idea?
great.
To put the financial
glad we're
genie,
hanging out.
the banking genie back into its bottle, to make banking boring, effectively to ban bankers from doing things that allow too much money to be created and too many bubbles to be built up, mobilizing idle savings, the idle savings of the richer members of society, and putting those idle savings, turning them into a force in the public interest, infrastructural works, public works, education, social security, and so on. That was the New Deal. In 1944, towards the end of the war, the New Dealers extended that New Deal internationally, as Europe was just a pile of ashes.
The Marshall Plan.
You don't need me to explain what happened to Japan in 1945. So Bretton Woods, it was a magnificent system. Think about it. The United States officialdom in DC effectively designed a global capitalist system that was like a planned economy. You have fixed exchange rates, 4% interest rates forever, 20 years of 4% interest rates, no ups and downs. It was maybe plus or minus 0.1%. So you knew what your mortgage rate would be in the next 20 years. You knew if you wanted to change dollars for British pounds, you knew how many pounds you would get. You would get the same quantity year in, year out. So it was a world which was a nightmare for financiers. And of course, that was by design. Did you know that in the Bretton Woods Conference in New Hampshire in 1944, Roosevelt imposed one single rule on his own. The rest he left to his minions. There were representatives from 100 different countries. Most of them already, they were not even liberated yet. They were under occupation because it was 1944. The Second World War had not ended. Experts, diplomats, politicians, and so on. One species of humanity was banned from entering the Washington Hotel. Bankers.
EA, thank you very much for the follow. I very much appreciate it, and I believe you are our 750th follower. Yay! I'm very excited about achieving arbitrary goals, you know?
A whole monetary global system was created on condition that bankers would not be part of it. Yeah? Interesting. You know, if anybody proposed this today, they would immediately be branded as raving communist lunatics. This was Bretton Woods, 1944. You know, it's important to think back about possibilities when we think of what is possible. Well, what happened in 1944 in Bretton Woods in 1930, 1931 in this country would have been completely pie in the sky. So anyway, but that system collapsed towards the end of the 1960s, officially 15th of August 1971, with Nixon's announcement that it's kaput, it's finished. I'm not going to go into this, but what happened after that was a very interesting, fascinating reversal in the flow of trade and money around the world.
I mean, never socialism. I'm trying not to get too involved with the discussion happening here. But, like, even if you're wearing, like, a cotton mask, it reduces transmission by about 60%. So, like, it is worth wearing, you know? It's not foolproof by any means, but it does do something. Alright. I mean, I didn't ban him for what it's worth, but, like... I don't have the source right available to me because I'm watching a video on economics.
Before the collapse of Bretton Woods, what was happening was this. This is how Bretton Woods was designed. America was a surplus country. The country with surpluses, with profits. especially after the Second World War, was the only creditor country, the only country that had surpluses, financial surpluses, surpluses of goods, a net exporter. And what the United States administration did as part of Bretton Woods was to say, okay, the only way of preventing a return of the Great Depression to this land by 1949, they were very worried about 1949 because it was 1929 plus 20. The only way of preventing it is to make sure that, okay, number one, we convert all the factories from military production to civilian production, producing white goods instead of tanks and bullets, producing cars instead of aircraft carriers. Right, but that's not enough, because those factories during the war economy were so productive in this country that they were capable of producing so many washing machines, tractors, and cars that Americans would simply not have enough use for them. So the only way of preventing the Great Depression from returning was by selling them to the Europeans. But the Europeans didn't have money. So New Dealers, being very practical people, said, we'll give them the money. It's what's called the Marshall Aid Plan. Surplus recycling. For 20 years, United States was recycling about 70% of American profits in Japan and in Europe, because this is what you do if you're a clever hegemon. What you do is you make sure that the only way that you can continue to have surpluses vis-a-vis somebody else is to finance them. Because if you don't, then they won't be able to afford to buy your stuff. Then you won't be able to have surpluses. The problem was, however, that those surpluses disappeared by the late 60s. America shifted from a surplus position to a deficit position. Both the government went in deficit and the American economy developed a trade deficit. It is fascinating that what happened after the collapse of Bretton Woods had been imagined by some smart fellows in this country. Remember Henry Kissinger?
Yeah, we remember Henry Kissinger.
Exactly my feelings. But he's a smart cookie, right? And in 1970, a year before the end of Bretton Woods, he was not yet Secretary of State. He was still head of the National Security Council. And of course, he's a cold warrior, geopolitical thinker. He thinks in terms of, a bit like Metternich would have in the 19th century. He comes from the same part of the world, has the same accent. So he asked all the people that were working for him the pertinent question. Now that the United States is shifting into a deficit position, we used to be a surplus, now we're going to become a deficit country. How can we maintain our global hegemony? Because it has never happened in the past. All empires, superpowers, fell once they became deficit countries or economic blocs. So he was worried about that. He didn't give a damn about economics, but he cared about power. A young man wrote a memo, 3/4 of a page, in reply. It was the most brilliant reply, and the one that really explains what happened between the 1970s and 2008 in the world, and of course in the United States. His answer was, it doesn't really matter whose surpluses are being recycled. What really matters to maintain in control is to be the one who is recycling other people's surpluses. Get it? We can maintain our superpower status, our hegemony, as long as we do the recycling of surpluses, even if the surpluses are not ours. Think about it. This is exactly the model that we have been living through between the 1970s and 2008. America turned into a deficit country. And now Donald Trump is complaining, we have a huge trade deficit with China, with Germany.
Level
we need to eliminate it.
Thank you very much for
Either
the follow.
he's completely unschooled or he's lying, or both. I added a third option. Because, look, I mean, the globalization would not have happened without the American deficits. The American trade deficit operated like a gigantic vacuum cleaner that was sucking into this country the net exports of Germany, of Holland, of France, of Japan, and later, of course, of China.
Socialism, good, Orange Man.
Keeping
bad.
those
Thank you very
factories
much for
going
the follow.
at full blast.
And a very good username.
And this deficit kept increasing. it is this increasing American trade
Left is
deficit that
best.
kept
We are
globalized.
listening to Yanis Varoufakis, a well-known economist speaking at Cambridge about basically is capitalism devouring democracy? And the unfortunate answer so far seems to be yes. We must sacrifice a sheep to the Lord. And a happy hell day to you too. No, Pork Nickel, not that one. That one's the cute one. We don't want to give away the cute one. Peppo Hands for our new followers. Familiar name that I have not explored. I remember Michael Brooks would mention him all the time. Yeah, I've never actually listened to one of his videos either. Somebody in chat recommended this video, and we've just been listening to it and learning and slowly exposing our conservative colleagues to socialist ideas. We'll get you, William of Orange. We'll get you. We'll get you one of these days. Yeah, we have a new emote. We have the Peppo Hands emote. We all love an underdog. Miss Parakeet, I wish I was as blazed as you are.
Globalized capitalism.
William of Orange, did you really want him to go in depth into accounting practices for like 4 centuries of development that he's gone over so far? Because I don't. I really don't want him to go into like the nitty gritty of all these things. I'm sure he could. He's an economist. But anyway.
In rude health. Now, of course, the question then is, how was it being paid for? Because Greece had a big deficit, and look at what happened to us. Well, this is the exorbitant privilege of the United States of America. At the very same time that the trade deficit was expanding, the rest of the world was sending to this country 70% of all profits the Germans made, the Dutch made, the Japanese made, and the Chinese are making. 70% of global profits were coming into Wall Street, seeking higher returns, being used to purchase US Treasury bills, American government debt. And so you had a pure recycling loop. So recycling was discovered by this young man, whose name, by the way, is Paul Volcker, who then became the chairman of the Fed. And who, just a week before he assumed the position of chairman of the Fed, in a lecture he gave at the University of Warwick in England, he said, this is the time when a controlled disintegration of the world economy is in the interest of the United States of America. Verbatim. I've learned this off by heart because it's so exciting. The controlled disintegration of the world economy. So that's what he meant. So you had this amazing system where you have increasing imbalances globally. America growing its deficits. Germany and Japan and then China growing its surpluses. When we increase our deficit, we are creating an imbalance. When somebody else is increasing their surplus, that's an imbalance. And globalization was based on this. Financialization. What's financialization? Why was Wall Street allowed to go crazy? Why were all the checks and balances that the new dealers introduced and Bretton Woods introduced, why did they go to the dogs? Why did Larry Summers, I believe he's got some connection with this place, why was he allowed to commit a crime against logic and humanity? To unleash the Wall Street bankers from their shackles. The result being 2008. The answer is because without unleashing the Wall Street bankers, it was impossible to close that loop. The only way you could have this model of the world economy where the United States deficit was keeping the rest of globalization going, with the rest of the world sending its surpluses into Wall Street for Wall Street to close the loop and pay for the deficit, was to let the Wall Street bankers do as they pleased. And when you do let the Wall Street bankers do as they please, you know what they do? You give a banker a few billion every day, for 5 minutes. Just park 5 billion with a banker for 5 minutes every day. This is to invite them to create very sophisticated bets using that 5 billion every day that they are always going to win. If I were to give you 5 billion every day for 5 minutes, you would work out ways of making a load of money.
Yeah, probably.
And exponentially increasing load of money. Anyway, the problem is that they built so many pyramids of financialized derivatives on top of this tsunami of capital that the rest of the world was saying that it combusted in 2008. And the result was what we're facing. So the point I'm making is that first you had the joint sphere of power, then that bisected into the political and the economic sphere. Then after the 1970s, the end of Bretton Woods, the economic sphere also divided and multiplied between the industrial sphere and the financial sphere. And all power ended up with finance. Because if you allow bankers to push their hand into the future so majestically, frequently, and without any kind of control, to bring value that has not been produced yet into the future and effectively to appropriate it themselves. And then you also say to them that they're too big to fail, and when they fail, then austerity for all is combined with socialism for the bankers. Then they have no reason why not to keep undermining capitalism again and again and again.
True.
So remember the question with which I started. Why do politicians seem to be so much less talented today than they were, 40 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago? Well, the answer is because the political sphere is completely powerless. The spheres that now have acquired power are the economic sphere and, magnificently, the financial sphere. So if you're a young, talented person who wants to change the world, who wants to do things, who's not very ideological or historically minded, who wants power?
Nycard.
What do you want to be, President of the United States or CEO of Goldman Sachs? CEO of Goldman Sachs. I remember the one longish conversation I had with Barack Obama when I was
a new setup? I don't think so.
The finance minister of Greece. The first thing he said to me was, I feel solidarity for the Greek people and we're behind you, but there's not much I can do to help. Okay? And then he immediately, without me saying anything, he went into a soliloquy, justifying himself by saying that, when I got elected, I realized there was nothing I could do because Wall Street had just imploded. And I had to save them, and that was, he said, political poison for me. Now, I don't know whether he believed it or not, and I can't see how he can explain the fact that he appointed Larry Summers to sort out the mess, unless, of course, you adopt the cynical view that it takes a murderer to work out how the criminal justice system should be reformed.
Probably because if you use the system to pay, probably because if you use the system to pay the debts, the entire thing stops working.
This is effectively the point I'm making. So, is capitalism consistent or sustainable within a democratic polity? Can it coexist with democracy? Absolutely not. Because capitalism is generating this shift of power away from the political sphere. And even if you have fantastically scripted constitutions, beautiful congresses with wonderful procedures and so on, power is going to shift away from those processes. They're going to become fig leaves for a system where power lives somewhere else. In my first meeting of finance ministers in Europe, I was exposed to this harsh reality, which I always knew. But it's one thing to know it as a radical lefty that nobody, that theorizes.
I hope so.
And puts forward, various working hypotheses in an academic environment. It's quite another to be told straight in your face. That was the beauty of those few months I spent in government, was exactly that. I didn't have to theorize anymore. I went to my first meeting of the Eurogroup. The Eurogroup is the meeting of the European Union finance ministers of the countries that share the same currency, the euro. So I walked in there and I tried to be as moderate and as sensible and as friendly as anyone who comes from a country that is bankrupt and whose new government has a title, or the party that won, coalition of the radical left.
Devil
Yeah?
23.
So there I
send a
was,
link
the
to,
Minister of Finance representing the
link to one of the
coalition
mods.
of the radical left in that cesspool
Otherwise, people
of
can't
conservatism. And I tried to be, all I said was that we have.
No, it's okay, Nycard. It's good to periodically remind people. So we're watching Yanis Varoufakis talk about whether or not capitalism can coexist alongside democracy. And essentially, after walking us through kind of the evolution of capitalism and modern financial banking, we get to the current day where essentially the two things can't really... It is a really fun name to say. It is. The two things can't really coexist anymore because the capitalist incentive to basically get as much power as you can get in order to use that power to make money constantly undermines democracy, no matter what the wording of your constitution is, no matter what, no matter how else it works. And so, like, he's basically just walked us through kind of the evolution of the system and why these two things can't coexist. And he's like a really good economist. Yeah.
We're facing a challenge, colleagues, I said. There is the principle, I said, of continuity in democracies, in liberal democracies. In other words, we're not going to start at year zero just because we were just elected. We have obligations to you that previous governments, Greek governments, have assumed, and which, of course, we were against, our party was against, but nevertheless, our state, because of the principle of continuity, still has these obligations to you, and therefore I cannot dismiss them. I have to take them seriously. I am obliged by the principle of continuity. At the same time, there is another principle, the principle of democracy. I could see that they didn't like that very much. And the principle of democracy is very simple. I have a mandate from the people of Greece to challenge all these obligations that we have, this particular fiscal and monetary policy that you've been imposing upon my country, which led to a Great Depression, which led me to be here, because if we didn't have a Great Depression, the Greeks were not stupid enough to vote for me. I mean, they didn't just become left-wingers. Our party went from 4% to 40% in 2.5 years because of the Great Depression. I didn't put it in those very words, but you can imagine. But more or less, this was my... I was trying to be extremely open to them and moderate and conciliatory with Wolfgang Schäuble, the finance minister of Germany. Okay. And I said, well, what happens in a democracy when two...
Oh, yeah. For reference, everybody... Oh, no. You can... No, don't apologize for trying to post a link, Devil23. I was just telling you that if you want the link posted, you have to whisper it to a mod. We've had a lot of, like, drive-by Nazis and bigots come through, dropping, like, links to, like, propaganda. So we had to turn off links in chat. But if you whisper it to a mod, they can post it for you, okay? Being a bank is actually just collecting free money. True. And yeah, he's talking about the financial collapse of Greece, which, if you didn't really pay attention to it, it was like one of the big economic explosions of like the last couple years. Just like the country completely imploded. Completely.
Principles clash. The principle of continuity and the principle of democracy. Well, we sit around the table like civilized people and we find a compromise. This is what democracies do. Liberal democracies, yes? I sit down. The French minister loved what I said, of course. Just complete hot air. Yes. I could see Wolfgang Schäuble, the German finance minister. He was looking at me with, eyes that felt like laser beams. And he gets the floor and he said, one sentence, which is the one that I'm going to leave you with. Elections cannot be allowed to change economic policy. got it? My response was, this is excellent news to the Chinese Communist Party because they believe that too. And I then came up with a proposal. This is why they hated me. I was very moderate. I said, in that case, Wolfgang, let's ban elections in bankrupt countries. Let's come out and declare that in the European Union, you can only have democracy if you're a creditor country. If you're a debtor country, no democracy. Elections cannot be allowed to change anything because we have a loan agreement. Huh? We have a debtor's prison. Let's put Greece in the workhouse. I didn't say all these things, but I did say the thing about the Chinese Communist Party. And also the proposal that we suspend elections while a country is in the red, in the European Union. That would be more honest. So the reason why I'm mentioning this is that Schäuble was right. In the capitalist, the globalized, financialized capitalism that we have created, elections cannot be allowed to change economic policy. Because economic policy simply springs out of the processes that I described that leave absolutely no room for anything beyond a semblance of a democratic process that legitimizes the lack of democracy. We live in pure, ironclad oligarchies which require, for legitimation purposes and for their reproduction, that we think that we live in democracies. Now, the tragedy is that capitalism is being overthrown. Not by the left. We are useless. Progressives, left-wingers, are a catastrophe. Huh? Has anybody seen The Life of Brian, Monty Python's movie? Remember the opening scene when they all hate each other? The Jews that are the Jews of the Liberation Front of Judea, again, whose worst enemy is the Liberation People's Front of Judea. That's the left. Huh? We are sectarian. We hate each other more than we hate anything else.
True.
Yeah? No, but and of course, and when we did overthrow capitalism, we created the gulag. So we are a disaster. Doesn't mean we shouldn't try again and to do it properly and democratically.
Hey,
but let's face it, capitalism is overthrowing itself with no help from us. And it's doing it in two ways. Firstly, think of 2008. This financialization process that I described imploded under the weight of its own hubris. And the result is a never-ending crisis. Don't believe anybody who tells you that the 2008 crisis ended. It never ended. It is continuing. It is mutating. It's taking different forms. It migrates. It goes to different parts of the world. It takes, for instance, in Germany, it takes the form of negative interest rates that are eating into the pension funds of the average middle-class person, who then turns against the political system and votes for the fascists of the Alternative für Deutschland. They don't have unemployment, but they have this sense of deflation of their hard-earned savings that creates the rise of xenophobia, racism, and the ultra-right. In my country, we have a Nazi party in parliament because we have a Great Depression, because we have an unemployment rate of 30%. And we have no interest rates because nobody's lending to anyone, because everybody's bankrupt. Yeah? In China, you have an investment rate, the proportion of GDP, of national income, that goes into investment is gigantic. It's 48%. 48 cents to every dollar earned in China goes into investment. Now, investment is a good thing, but overinvestment simply means that the Chinese authorities have given up on the West. Because, let's face it, the only reason why you don't have a Great Depression in this country today is because in 2008, which was your version, our version of 1929, two things happened differently to what happened in 1929. One was that the Federal Reserve started printing money as if there is no tomorrow. Didn't happen in 1929. And the second thing was China boosted its investment ratio so high in order to rebalance global capitalism. They did it very well, but it's not sustainable. So Europe is not sustainable, China is not sustainable, and the United States today, which is celebrating growth, What growth? You have 2.5% growth. All the things that shouldn't grow, grow. The things that should grow are not growing. You do not have any serious investment in good quality jobs in this country.
True.
You have wage stagnation.
True.
You have a situation, people say, oh, it's, this idiocy of the Democratic Party that Putin won the election against Hillary Clinton. Come on, wake up. You cannot say to Trump voters that they're idiots and Putin duped them. I mean, you can say that, but then that's it. You lose them forever. And it's also not true. People say to me, well, how do you explain that Trump won? I'm an economist, so I look at numbers. The number that I think is most spectacular in this country is that in 2016, more than half of the families in this country could not afford the cheapest new car, which cost $14,000.
Yep.
Either they didn't have the money, or they didn't have the money and they did not have the credit ratings necessary to borrow $14,000. More than half of the families cannot afford the cheapest car.
Yep.
That's why Trump got elected. Because Obama failed spectacularly to shift the burdens of the crisis of the financial sector onto the 0.1%.
My man.
So, I've spoken for far too long.
My man.
Let's end on a positive note.
This journey has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you for, I think, Taco Cat for linking this video.
Shall we? Technically, it's really very simple how to solve the problem or how to begin a process. We need a New Deal, except that this must be an international New Deal.
We need socialism.
Exactly as the New Deal was in 1933, but globally. That's not new. Bretton Woods was an international New Deal. So we need a new Bretton Woods. We need progressives in this country, progressives in Europe, to get their act together and start collaborating. Because,
maybe a Green New Deal? Maybe a New Deal to save our world from climate apocalypse? Maybe, something that will preserve the planet for the foreseeable future? Maybe a Green New Deal like that? Maybe that kind of a Green New Deal? Maybe that could be used? We could leverage that to save the planet? Maybe? A little? Just a tiny bit? Oh, globally, OMG, he's a globalist. He finally goes mask off.
The bankers are very good at being internationalists. They love each other, and they work very closely together. The fascists are fantastic. Trump loves Le Pen, Orban, the Alternative for Deutschland. They love each other, they cooperate. They have very good... Only we progressives fail to get together and start believing that it is possible to do that which has already been done before. It's not pie-in-the-sky stuff. Now, this in order to ameliorate the effects of the ongoing crisis after 2008. Then, once we stabilize the world, like Bretton Woods stabilized the world after the Second World War, then we can start thinking about post-capitalism. Because we must. Capitalism is overturning itself, not only through its crisis, but also through the technologies that it is creating. 3D printing, artificial intelligence, the internet, will make sure that in a few years there will be no need to have a corporation. Corporations will lack their raison d'etre. The only reason why you have General Motors is economies of scale. Economies of scale are dying because of the new technologies that capitalism is creating.
True.
So you are going to have a situation in which we are going to have magnificent productivity, magnificent capacity to produce stuff, but the large majority will not be able to buy any of it. So that will be a crisis of not just the poor and the have-nots, but also the haves. But we must never believe that because there's going to be a crisis of capitalism, because capitalism is going to undermine...
William of Orange, it would be a good thing, except you need people to buy stuff in a capitalist society. That's why we need to transition away from this system of economic growth.
And overthrow itself. Good things will happen. In the 1930s, capitalism imploded and Nazism happened. So we can have one certainty: capitalism cannot maintain itself. Something else, another system.
Yeah, but William of Orange, what he's talking about is that it breaks the economies of scale. So the massive corporations that we have right now are rendered obsolete because there's no reason to have a General Motors when you can like 3D print your own car, you know? Yeah, breaking the economies of scale is good, but then capitalism falls apart. That's his point.
Of organizing economic and political life is going to follow. And we better make sure that the way in which we choose as a species, as a humanity, that different way of doing things is selected democratically. Because even though democracy takes too long, as Oscar Wilde said, socialism would never happen because it takes too many long evenings. And it's tedious. There's no doubt about that. If you've been to a political meeting, you know how tedious it is. It's the only choice we have. And thankfully, we are creating the technologies that will make these debates both more manageable and more hopeful in terms of delivering a future that resembles, as I say in the book, Star Trek and not the Matrix. Thank you.
Are we going to do a Q&A?
So, Yanis, you're a very interesting combination of idealism and pragmatism. You identified the problem that we have here, which led to somehow Trump being elected. Yet, that terrible income inequality, which has gotten way worse in the last 12 months and looks like it's going to get worse, even more, get worse again, did not produce enough people to elect Bernie Sanders. And I went to his rallies and he said great things. Do you think that this country just can't wrap its head around that word socialist? And that's my question is, does it have to repackage the thinking?
Well, I used to think that until Bernie Sanders called himself a socialist and won the primary election before it was stolen from him. Bernie Sanders won the election, or he would have won the election if the National Democratic Committee did not do its utmost to perform a coup d'etat against him. And this, I'm stating this as an accusation. The Democratic Party is its own worst enemy.
So given that, this is the substrate that we have to work with. How do we change the thinking? If we want the things that that party is proposing, how do we get the
No, we want better than what this party is proposing.
electorate to change their voting? Why did they vote for Trump? Why?
Well, well, firstly, the abstention rate was quite high. A lot of good people could simply not bring themselves to vote for Hillary, and they didn't vote at all. And many others.
Battle of Canada, I don't think so.
I wasn't here during your election campaign, but I was in Britain before the Brexit referendum, and I believe that there are great similarities between the two. And I remember I was campaigning against Brexit in Britain, in the same way I would have campaigned against Trump here, of course. And I remember asking people who were not racist, who were not xenophobic, who were not right-wing, who were not anti-European, why are you voting for Brexit? And the answer had nothing to do with Europe. The answer was this: if I vote to remain in the European Union, those bastards that have been treating me like a discarded piece of rag, a discarded rag, are going to be very happy. So I'm going to cast my vote in a manner that maximizes the discomfort of those who've been treating me as if I'm not a human. Now, I don't know, you have to tell me whether this is an appropriate comparison to what was going on here. A lot of people who voted for Trump simply wanted to punish the establishment. And they wanted, I think that there's quite a lot of supporting evidence. Yeah. Of course, there are racists, and there are Nazis, and there are right-wingers, and bigots, and misogynists who voted for Trump. But I don't think that those were the ones who made the difference. The ones who made the difference were the ones who could not afford a car, the ones who had believed in Obama and who voted for Obama in 2008. I'm reading at the data, And there seems
Oh,
to
you're
be a
welcome.
very large
I followed you back
number of
'cause
voters who
you're
voted for
gonna be
Obama
running
in 2008 and
for
Trump in
office. That's
2016.
awesome.
Now, that cannot be explained on the basis of racism. It cannot be explained on the basis of misogyny. It is simply, to hell with you. I am not going to vindicate yet again a presidential candidate who goes into Wall Street 6 months before the presidential election, gives private speeches for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and, excuse the language, shits on people like me in front of the bankers, calling me names, and promising to them that they will be allowed to continue doing that which has put us and our country in this position.
So, trying to be optimistic
Yeah.
for a moment. If we were trying to create some kind of apparatus, I mean, in the 50s,
I like how he
Roosevelt did the
smiles
very
like a
thing that
naughty
they said was
child 'cause he
impossible.
said a
He
swear word.
put 90% tax on corporate America to fund all these great schemes, the Social Security system, Medicare. These things were made possible, but the workers had unions then, quite strong unions. Now that's all been taken away. How are people going to organize and overthrow the system? As you say, I mean, it may implode, but in the interim, people are just surviving on $10 an hour wages or not surviving. So where is the impetus for
Well,
revolution
you do not
come?
need punitive tax rates now. You don't need 90%. This was a gimmick anyway.
No, but it worked. It worked.
Yeah, I mean, it was more of a political stunt. I don't believe that it is necessary to have such high tax rates. But what you do need is you need to change the discourse in a way that appeals not only to those who would have joined trades unions, but to people who would never have imagined themselves to be radical or even progressive. So let me give you an example. Take NAFTA. There's a lot of discussion in this country now about NAFTA. The liberal establishment says, free trade is everything. The pie is going to shrink if you do away with it. But some people in the Rust Belt say, well, that's your pie, that's not my pie. My pie has disappeared a long time ago. So if I can manage to hold on to a few, steel workers' jobs by means of tariffs,
Yeah, I do.
Let's do it, because it's better than all of us being thrown into the dustbin. Why not change the narrative and to say, yes, we want to renegotiate NAFTA, along the following lines. If Mexico wants to continue to have, or Mexican capitalists want to continue to have free access to the American market,
Tax
Mexico is
brackets.
going to have to introduce a minimum wage in Mexico that provides a living wage by Mexican standards,
amazing
not by American
skills.
standards, to the workers who work in the factories that produce the stuff that are then transported over to the United States. Now,
Tax
that
tracts.
is a progressive renegotiation of NAFTA. Not tariffs, but minimum living wages in the poorer countries. Okay, so that way,
The anal
Not
beads
building a
are the
of
amount
course,
of money
not
you have to
building
pay
the wall.
in the tax brackets.
But then you wouldn't need to build the wall.
Of course you wouldn't.
Yeah?
No.
So that is one example.
But the point he's making here is exactly why I've made this channel, by the way. Like, the entire point of this channel is to try and reach not just people who agree with me, not just socialists, not just market socialists, not just Marxist-Leninists. The people I'm most interested in reaching are the liberals, the neoliberals, the moderate conservatives. These are the people that I'm interested in reaching and pulling over into our coalition, right? Because we're going to need a whole lot of people, guys, in order to make this world a better place. We're going to need a whole lot of people. And, this is why I give so many conservatives who come in here a lot of time to, talk and disagree with me, and why I want to give them time to kind of percolate in these ideas, right? So I describe myself as a market socialist. Yes, I do. I think market socialism would immensely improve our economy and largely the rest of the world as well. But yeah, I think it'd be a much more efficient way to run our system, and I think it would maximize everyone in this country's freedom. And so, yeah, people's lives improve. But and that's why I want to make this a community where, you know, we don't tolerate bigotry, but we do tolerate people who might not agree with us right away. You know, there's a tendency on the left to like lash out against anyone who doesn't agree with us, to have this kind of purity politics, by which we expect everyone to be perfect, and I'm not about that. You know, I want to actually build a coalition. You've said like, so you like butts? Oh no, but I do like butts. Um, I do like butts. Butts are great. There's a huge amount of variation among leftist definitions. So, what do you define market socialism as? Well, essentially, socialism is two main components. One is workers controlling the means of production, and two, decommodifying a significant portion of the economy. So when I'm talking about market socialism, what I'm talking about is decommodifying the things that people need to live, such as housing, water, food to a certain extent, electricity, internet, healthcare, mental health care, education, these things, right? And when I talk about workers controlling the means of production, I mean by we would achieve that by slowly incentivizing the creation of worker co-ops and shifting our economy over time to rely on worker co-ops instead of on traditional private businesses. Because worker co-ops tend to be more efficient than traditional business structures. They tend to be by about 9 to 15%. And they more equitably distribute the profits of the company. They tend to have happier employees. They tend to be more firmly rooted in their communities, i.e., typically factories that are worker co-ops aren't going to, uproot themselves and vote to move overseas. Let's see. Where's the distinction between what's allowed to be commodified? My distinction is largely based on things that people need in order to survive. So, like, when I talk about what I think should be decommodified, I'm thinking of, like, the things you need in order to live in a modern society. You should have all of those, regardless of how much money you make. And the incentive to work in a market co-op society would largely be to better your quality of life. So, whether that is by buying nice food to eat, or buying a suburban house with the white picket fence and a dog, or these things would still cost money. But if you went broke, if you your home got torched or whatever, you would still be able to go and live in a place that is decent and not like a cesspool of awfulness. So these are my general positions in a very broad sense, and that's basically what I mean by market socialist. So, yeah, I think that would largely address all of my concerns with capitalism. And I think that the market is a perfectly fine way of distributing some goods, especially luxury goods. And I am very content to allow the market to continue distributing those kinds of goods. I am not content to allow the market to distribute baseline necessities that people need in order to survive. And let's see, what's the other thing? I had one more thing I wanted to add. Basically, like, people should be able to live a decent life. I want everyone to be able to succeed at whatever they want to do with their life. What's your view of anarcho-communism? My view of anarcho-communism is largely positive, because, like, I think that market socialism is just like the first step, right? I think after the first step, I'm open to a large degree of different second and third steps. I don't think that market socialism is utopia. I think it is a practical necessity, and largely, I think there are probably better systems in the future that we either know about already or might discover as we go along. How would debt be handled? Like, the biggest way capitalism traps us is through credit and debt, even up to imprisonment or to enforce it. I mean, largely, I don't think debt should work like that. I guess. My preferred method might be eliminating the concept of debt entirely. because like you would be guaranteed the things you need in order to live, right? And if you go completely destitute, you would still have a place to live. You would still have water, electricity, food, healthcare, internet. You would still have all of these things. So I think maybe we just eliminate the concept of debt and instead we focus on, your ability to perform in the workforce. And I think that also like having decommodified housing to a certain degree would also drastically reduce like property costs. How would we transition to this though? Like banking would be obsolete? Well, I think that largely it would be a slow transition over time, Miss Parakeet. So like I'm in favor of loan programs to worker co-ops to get more and more of them started in the economy. I'm in favor of adopting programs like what Bernie Sanders proposed. Like if you want to sell your company, you first have to offer it to your workers. Or if we got like the government has to step in to bail out your business, it has to transition to a worker co-op. I think policies like this would largely be extremely good. And yeah, state-owned banks, postal banking is something I'm very much in favor of. There are a bunch of small scale changes that I would like to have, because I'm also like, there might be problems with worker co-ops that we don't know about if we're transitioning to a society full of worker co-ops, and so it'd be good, I think, to do this slowly, over time. Would the term social democrat accurately describe me? No, I'm a market socialist. But I fundamentally believe in democracy, and my position is that we have democracy as a remedy for tyranny in the political world, and I believe that we should have democracy as a remedy for tyranny in the economic world as well. Because currently, private companies are tyrannical. Yeah. And like I'm not an economics person, so I'm fully open to the possibility I might be wrong when it comes to banking. But I firmly believe that people smarter than me could find a way to make it work. Also, I think that we should abolish the notion of prisons. We should probably think of it more as adopting the policies that allow us to reform people most effectively. Oh, excuse me.
Take, for instance, the
and yeah, loan sharks should absolutely be outlawed. Absolutely. Like, there's no reason we should have legalized loan sharking.
question about the health service here, the health system. Well, you don't have a health system, the absence of a health system. Obamacare was a complete disaster. Obamacare is an affront against logic.
And you want to know why that is? It's not because of Obama. It's largely because it was a Republican plan. Obamacare was like Romney's baby. It was birthed in a Republican think tank, and Obama adopted it largely to try and appease Republicans, an effort which failed miserably. So yeah, there's a reason the Affordable Care Act sucks ass, and it's largely because of Republicans.
The idea of universal cover is absolutely essential, but also the idea that the state is going to be subsidizing private companies to provide public health without any controls regarding the prices of the services and the pharmaceuticals is a catastrophe. It's like effectively subsidizing the private insurers. And this is why, of course, they contributed massively to Obama's campaign. Without the so-called public option. It's ludicrous. So how about the following argument?
In regards to decommodification of vital needs, are you arguing for the provision of these things for those in need or for the dissolution of the entire part of the market? To differing degrees. I think that like utilities like water and electricity should largely be handled by the federal government. I'm fine with utilities being handled by the government since the government largely builds the infrastructure for those things anyway, and then for whatever reason, allow private companies to extract profit from these things that people need in order to survive. I would much rather that the government takes that over and instead of operating it at a profit, just operates it at cost. And for everyone, regardless of how successful you are, right? And like the same goes for internet as well, at healthcare, mental health care, some to some degree education. Like we could still have like Harvard as a private school or something, but having a decommodified education option that allows you to like get a PhD if you want, I think would be great. And when it comes to housing, it would largely be for people who need some place to live. So largely for people who can't afford their own housing. And yeah, I mean that's basically where I'm at. Like you would still be able to buy a house or get maybe an apartment or buy like a condo or something if you wanted to. But yeah. Does that clear up your question, Battle of Cannae? I'm in favor of somewhat dissolving some of those things.
About having a proper national health service, a public health service system in the United States, so that we can introduce tax cuts. Think about that. That would really throw the Republicans, wouldn't it? Because your health system is the most expensive in the world. You pay twice as much on health than the rest of the world, and you have far worse outcomes. So imagine that you created a proper public system. You'd save a huge amount of money, public money, and then you could give them away as tax cuts. But
Yup, he's right. He's right. Medicare for all actually saves us money, guys. It saves us money. And it saves businesses money, guys. Did you know that about a third of non-wage benefits go to Medicare costs, like medical costs for workers? It would save businesses a whole lot of money, and they don't typically talk about that, largely because businesses have decided that they would much rather have leverage over their workers than save money. But it would fundamentally save them a lot of money. Having those things be largely provided by the government does not mean it's complete dissolution in the market. These things being largely provided by the government is different from banning the private market from providing them. Which are you arguing for? I'm arguing for the government being the sole provider of these things. That is what I'm arguing for. The market is the sole provider of needed housing. The government is the sole provider of energy and water. I'm for the government being the sole provider of Medicare and mental health care. Yeah, these things I'm fine with. Like the government already like maintains the water quality here. Like if we didn't leave like water up to like the market forces, Flint, Michigan wouldn't have happened. The only reason Flint, Michigan happened was that people were trying to save money on water. So yeah. This is largely like what I advocate for. I don't think that there's any reason to have market alternatives for things that people need in order to survive. Because you can't, the government is accountable to us in a democracy. And I think that I would much rather have an accountable entity handling these things than an unaccountable private firm.
But why not also say that those tax cuts will go to the lowest wage earners, not to the top? So that's how you change the debate. You get out of the way of the stereotype that the Republicans are trying to create for you. Huh?
Yep.
Absolutely.
And you subvert the dominant way of thinking.
Yep. He's
So
right.
I would like to hog the questioning, but I don't think it's fair.
Like he's 100% right. We need to win over moderates. We need to win over liberals. We need to win over neoliberals because guess what, guys? Climate change we're on the clock. Climate change is happening, and we need to get everyone together on these issues. Otherwise, we're going to die, and our kids are going to die. And I don't know about you, but I'm not taking the doomer pill today. Hope pill now, hope pill forever, comrades.
Because I'm sure there are lots of good questions that are going to come from the audience. So I'm going to open up the questions. And
Okay.
if you could confine it to one, I would be appreciative.
It may be 1.5. I thought for a minute your talk was going to be almost entirely about Harvard. Marshall, who announced it at Harvard commencement, Kissinger, and then Larry Summers. Have this idea that maybe Obama was put in the White House to bail out Harvard, whose endowment went from losing $11 billion to regaining it. I think many people in this country are still not convinced that Obama did have a choice. Now, you said, I believe that he did, but can you be a little more specific about, and you sort of writ large, you talk about a New Deal. Could you be more specific about what a person in the White House could have done, what it would have looked like that would have been more like bailing out Wall Street, more like bailing out Main Street than bailing out Wall Street? And can you explain why the social democratic politics of building a politics where we control the government and regulate capitalism is not the way to go, but some other alternative politics is what you're implying, but you haven't really, I don't think, spelled out.
Okay, I'll start from the second part. Look, the New Deal that I am suggesting as a first step is social democratic, but in the good old-fashioned sense of it. So you need social democratic measures in order to stabilize the political economy before we can have a genuine conversation about what comes next, the more radical part. Creating, for instance, changing corporate law. I mean, corporate law is a political value judgment. So when some corporation goes bust, who gets paid first amongst the creditors is a political decision. So why not change it? Why have the bankers get paid first and the workers last? Why allow people to own shares in a company in which they don't work? This is very, very radical, I know. But imagine having a situation where you can only have shares in a company in which you actually provide labor. Now, then you have socialism, but without state control. So that's the part of the second question. But let's go back to Obama. Did he have a choice? Of course he had a choice. He could have appointed as instead of appointing Tim Geithner and Larry Summers, he could have appointed Elizabeth Warren with a mandate to save the banks, but to expropriate the bankers, which is not a...
I think it's fine to restrict personal choice when it comes to things people need to live. Like, again, if you go back in time to, like, the beginning of when electricity was starting to emerge, Battle of Cannae, like, you'll get, like, competing electrical companies, where, like, you'd have just crisscrossing wires across New York City streets. It would block out the sun. The reason we don't have that today is because the government stepped in and built the wires themselves, built the infrastructure. So if the government's stepping in to build the infrastructure, if our taxpayer money is building the infrastructure, why do we then privatize those options? Why are we paying to build private companies? Why not just pay to eliminate the middleman? Like, I don't know if you've noticed, but PG&E sets California on fire like every year. Providing people what they need to be done without restricting people's choices. I disagree. Like, I'm fine with people selling maybe bottled water, but I don't think, like, the water out of your taps should be reliant on an entity that is not accountable to the people, That's my general stance. A private company is not accountable to you in the same way a government official is, in a democracy. On top of that, like, do you know that the United States government, like, invested to spread high-speed internet into rural areas? Do you know how much we paid for that? We paid two private companies, AT&T and another company. We paid $2 massive, massive corporations to build the infrastructure across the United States to have high-speed internet in rural areas. You know what happened? We paid them trillions of dollars. Trillions of dollars. They only did a third of it. And then they stopped and said, we ran out of money. More money, please. We gave them trillions of dollars. Why? They're unaccountable entities. No one knows what happened to that money. So, why not have the government do it instead? The government doesn't have to operate at a profit. The government doesn't have to operate in a competitive environment. And this is why I advocate for necessities that the government provides these things. Now, by the way, I'm not unreasonable. If, private companies want to come in and offer faster internet, that's totally fine by me. But the government should provide, for example, a baseline internet speed for everybody. Or, for example, the government's not going to provide you Pop-Tarts, but if you need a loaf of bread, if you need eggs, if you need milk, you can go to the local government food bank in this market socialist world that I'm describing for you. If you need water, you can just turn on your tap and get clean water out of your tap. These are things we could do right now. We just don't, largely because capitalism has deemed it too expensive. So, yeah, this is my position. The government takes on these larger projects that they already build the infrastructure for anyway, and instead of us privatizing the companies that then provide the services after the government does the work and the taxpayers pay for it, no, let's just eliminate the middleman here. The government can perfectly provide services without having to ban the market from offering other choices. Failure of the government while working with privatized business is an argument for the government doing it, not banning private companies from those industries. I mean, why would you want... In what scenario, Battle of Cannae, in what scenario can a private business compete with the government? Why would you want a private business to come in and do water? Are you advocating the private business can just come into a water source and build their own pipes and use it to distribute their own water to people through their own pipes? How are they going to be able to compete with the government? How do they compete with the government in this scenario? Do you just want crisscrossing water pipes that go to 2 to every home? No, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It doesn't make any sense for these things that people need to survive. And there's a fundamental problem of what you want private power plants sitting right next to public power plants? No, that doesn't make sense. What you want the private power lines running next to public power lines? No, that doesn't make any sense either. This entire conception of how this works is nonsensical and not related to how our actual world works. We currently build the infrastructure with taxpayer money. That being the case, why do we offer it? Why do we offer these services in a market? These are not services that are served well by existing within a market structure, unlike luxury goods, which operate perfectly fine in a market environment. Yeah. Okay, but the things that I'm saying need to be decommodified without any competition are literally water, electricity, and internet. Those are the things. When it comes to housing, water, electricity, internet, healthcare, those are the things. When it comes to education, there can be private institutions. I have nothing against that. When it comes to food, yeah, you can have private food. Yeah. When it comes to housing, yeah, you can have commodified housing. I'm not against that either. When it comes to a bunch of these things where it makes sense, yeah, you can have a market for that. But it's a market built on top of a foundation of decommodified goods. So again, if you need a house, if you need a housing unit, you get one. You know, it might not be the highest quality place to live, but you get one. And then you can go and improve your quality of life if you want to. You know, you don't starve to death, but you aren't also treated to like 5-course meals. You know, you get health insurance. Yeah. Like, which were you saying you wanted to have competition in? Because like I have a very select few things that I want to decommodify, and there are things that largely make sense to decommodify. I'm not for like decommodifying luxury goods. You can still go and buy a PS6 or something, you know, or a Nintendo Game Gear, you know. Yeah.
A new idea. In 1992, the Swedish banks, actually all the Scandinavian banks, went bust. And what the governments did then was to say to the bankers, okay, out. They took over the banks, they nationalized them, put in a new board of directors, and within 2 years they had sold them back to the private sector, but cleansed. The original bankers had gone, okay, with new regulations. He didn't do that. He left, you know, Jamie Dimon, Goldman Sachs intact, all the structures of power. In 2009, when he moved into the White House, for about 6 to 8 months, I grant you, not more than that, he had a window of opportunity, he had the whole nation behind him, he could have done that, even Republicans would have, even libertarians would have approved of expropriating the bankers. He didn't. Instead, he allowed Larry and Tim to create the so-called Summers-Geithner plan. If you haven't studied that, go and study it. It is a remarkable, ingenious way of conjuring up around $9 trillion and giving it to the bankers without anybody realizing it. You remember the bailout that Hank Paulson came up with was $700 billion, and everybody went, $700 billion. Initially, he was defeated in Congress, and then he managed to push it through. $700 billion is peanuts. Geithner and Summers created $9 trillion without anybody realizing it. Okay? So Obama had a choice to do it, and he did it. Okay? Now we are paying for it because Trump is president.
I've been very concerned lately about China and sort of we have transferred so much money from our economy over to China by buying all those things and supporting their economy over there so they could make more and more money. They are now all over Africa, you know, buying things and investing over there and getting those countries dependent on them and supporting, you know, non-democratic people. And I'm just
like
wondering,
whom?
well,
We are in a country that supports Saudi Arabia.
yes, that's true. Right. So
Suddenly we have a problem with, you know, superpowers supporting non-democratic people.
yes, I mean, yes, I do, but I also am just concerned that we've sort of created the economic power that China sort of has now, and they're using it, I fear, going to be using it against us eventually and against...
Oh, no. Battle of Cannae. Again, what I'm saying is when it comes to internet, you provide a base level of speed. If private companies want to come in and provide faster speed, I'm all for that. We can have worker co-op businesses come in with faster speed for that. But what I'm saying is that the baseline speed would be like, you know, that would be the network created by the government and maintained by the government. But if someone wants to come in and increase your speed, I'm all for that.
the better interests of a lot of people.
Allow me to put your mind to rest.
Okay, great.
My main point is, like, to exist in a modern society, we need internet connectivity now. Like, we need it. It's not just like something that's nice to have. It's something that like is necessary for someone to exist, to use in a modern society, and to work in a modern society, and to function in a modern society. And so like the government should be able to provide this to everyone. And I think that that is a reasonable thing to expect. And again, if somebody wants to increase their speed, I'm all for that. I'm all for that. If you have private businesses that offer that, but there should be a base level of speed and access guaranteed by the government. Phone service too. True. Communications enabling practices.
You shouldn't worry about that.
Okay.
It's very simple. And let me explain why you shouldn't worry about it. But please continue.
Well, I mean, they're in Africa. They're lending money to countries to build ports and different infrastructure.
To build what?
Port harbors.
And what's wrong with that?
And well, because
Countries that need ports get ports.
but they're making people dependent on. I mean, I know it's the same thing that we've done, which is
No, it's not.
horrible around the world.
They are far more humanistic than the United States ever was.
Really? Okay.
Absolutely.
Great. So
Let me give you an example. Of course, they are peddling for influence.
yeah.
Yeah? But they are non-interventionist. Absolutely non-interventionist in a way that Europeans, the West, has never managed to fathom.
But I have a feeling they have a longer-term thought process that is more
All right.
interventionist.
But
anyway,
let's judge what we
no.
see. Let's
Okay.
judge what.
Okay.
Well, let's start at the beginning. The Chinese never asked Apple to go to Shenzhen and produce all the iPhones. It was Steve Jobs that decided that. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
It was not China that went to Washington, D.C. and demanded that they buy a third of your national debt. If they hadn't bought it, you would be in serious trouble. Mm-hmm. Okay. Number 3. I did allude to this in my talk. If in 2008 China had not cranked up their credit bubble, you would be in a new Great Depression now. Mm-hmm. So, China, the United States, and the European Union are absolutely synergistic, and they need one another in a way that...
Useless romantic, I think we need to recognize that what he's talking about is their foreign policy as regards to foreign countries that they deem as countries, which unlike Tibet and the Uyghurs, they don't, which is a crime. I don't support anything that China does with regard to Tibet or the Uyghurs, or Taiwan for that matter, or Hong Kong for that matter. But when we're talking about international diplomatic efforts, like in Africa, which is what this woman was asking about, specifically China's efforts in Africa have been to build, basically to build infrastructure. Also, hello, Admiral Coffee. Not a whole lot is up. I'm mostly just watching this economist talk about things and talking about market socialism. So we're in agreement that there is a baseline service by the government, private businesses not locked out. So in regard your earlier comments that industry should be completely decommodified, what do I actually mean? I mean that the government should offer a baseline of decommodified services and goods for people. And that includes like housing, again. This doesn't mean all housing is decommodified, but you should have a baseline of housing that is decommodified. When it comes to internet service, you should have a baseline service that is decommodified. When it comes to water, that should be decommodified. When it comes to energy, that should be decommodified. When it comes to healthcare, decommodified. When it comes to education, I believe it should be decommodified all the way up to PhD level. But if you want to go to, a Harvard University or some such institution, that's totally fine. These are my basic positions. Like, again, if you need food, like there is a decommodified food bank that you can go to for basic foodstuffs. But otherwise, you know, there's the grocery store is still there to you know go get your delicious Pop-Tarts. Yeah. Do I have a reading list? No, I don't. I'm sorry. I'll work on coming up with one. Okay. So yeah, I mean, does that kind of get more towards answering your question, Battle of Cannae? I do think that, again, when it comes to like water and energy, those things should just be. I don't agree with privatizing those things at all because it gets messy really quickly. But when it comes to other things, like maybe schooling to a certain degree or internet speeds or phone service, I'm open to these kinds of things. Yeah.
If we fail to acknowledge and to nurture, billions of people, including the majority of the people in this country, are going to suffer. Now, I am not going to stand here and defend China and the Chinese Communist Party. I already made some negative remarks about the Chinese Communist Party in referring to, you know, their attitudes as being compatible with those of Wolfgang Schäuble. My concern about China is the authoritarian manner in which the Chinese regime is treating the Chinese people. As a Democrat, I have a problem with this. Mind you, I have to tell you that, from my understanding of China, it's a very interesting social experiment, in the sense that at the local level, or the regional level, you now have a boisterous democracy. At the local and regional level. Even with popular success stories in overthrowing local authorities, local bureaucrats who have been corrupt, who have been this, who have been that, who have been the other. When it comes to the influence of China outside its borders, I have to say.
What baseline internet speed should be provided free of charge? That one I don't know. I don't know much about internet speeds. I just know that something decent for modern things should be provided. I mean, like other countries have like 1 gig, no problem. So I mean, I guess it depends on what we can offer people, you know?
Firstly, it's quite remarkable that they don't seem to have any military ambitions. Secondly, Africa. I'll give you an example, a specific example. Ethiopia. 2004, because I happened to be there, and I have some first-hand experience of it. They went into Ethiopia. I'll tell you why they went into Ethiopia, because they suspected there was oil.
Oh, I mean, we can. I think definitely in a modern era, definitely far better than dial-up. I mean, I would say like other countries can offer like easily over a gig like per second in internet speed. I think we could offer something like that. You know, we gotta look forward into the future because you know the demand for data is only going to go up.
Because China is a major industrial power, but it lacks...
This lecture is from 2018.
...primary resources. Now, instead of going into Africa with troops, colonially, destroying the country, killing people like the West has done for the last 100 years, what they did was they went to Addis Ababa and they said to the government, we would like, we can see you have problems with your infrastructure, we would like to build some new airports, upgrade your railway system, create a telephone system, and rebuild your roads. And we'll do this all for free. No strings attached. We don't want anything from you. And they did. Why did they do it? Because this is soft power. Because because they knew that if oil is discovered, and it was discovered later, then, of course, the Ethiopian government will be much more open to Chinese oil companies coming there. They have never combined their investment with imperialistic view. You know, when I was Minister of Finance, I had a very interesting experience with Costco, one of the Chinese national companies that in the end bought the port of Piraeus. When I moved into the ministry, I found a contract from the previous government that they had already sold the port of Piraeus for a pittance and under ridiculous conditions to the Chinese, under the guidance, of course, of the European Union and the International Monetary Fund as well. And in other words, I was, as a minister, I was bound to a
Oh yeah. Taco Cat, I'm kind of in the same boat. Though I think this could also be one of those things where, like, you know, you have room for it to be a public good, but like on a baseline level, and have you know, again, if these are the concessions we have to make, I'm all for making you know, these decommodified aspects a public good, with additional like improvements on top of them for private, again, worker co-op improvements.
particular deal that was terrible for Greece. And I went to the Chinese and discussed it with them. And I was really astonished. I said to them, look, you're paying too little, you're not committing to a sufficient level of investment, and you are treating our workers as fodder. You are effectively subcontracting labor to horrible companies that exploit the workers, and I can't deal with this. And effectively, I proposed to them to renegotiate the contract. So instead of getting 67% of the shares of the port, they would get, with the same price, 51. The remaining shares would go into the Greek pension fund system in order to bolster the capitalization of the public pensions. Secondly, I want you to commit to 180 million euros of investment within 12 months. And thirdly, proper collective bargaining with the trade unions and no subcontracting of labor. And to my astonishment, they said, okay. Can you imagine if that was a German company or an American company? That's why I'm saying I don't think you should worry.
Okay, I won't.
Hi.
Well, the reason I don't call myself a social democrat is because I'm a socialist. Again, like, these are things that fundamentally move our society into a socialist one. So I call myself what I am. And I call myself this largely because anyone who opposes my position is going to call me a socialist anyway. So why not just own the label and say, yeah, I'm a socialist, and I advocate for socialist policies. This is fundamentally like why I call myself a market socialist, because I would like to live in a society where there are no private companies anymore, where everything is instead a worker co-op, owned by the workers at that company. Yeah. And also because I think that by calling myself a socialist and by being able to make a decent, good argument for my positions, I can get people used to the idea of socialism and get them to understand that largely socialism is something that improves their freedom and their capacity to succeed in this world and do what they want to do. And I think that being able to demystify this concept is something that can only fundamentally be a good thing. Because, like, again, if I were to run for office with these policies, they would call me a socialist. They wouldn't call me a social democrat. They would call me a socialist. So yeah, let me be called a socialist, because I am a socialist. Like, I want the workers to control the means of production, and I want to decommodify a significant portion of our economy. I am a socialist. And the idea, fundamentally, is that socialism is not some pie-in-the-sky thing. It is something that we can achieve. And it is something we can achieve with reasonable arguments. And I think that that's something that largely is really, really good for all of us, right? When they see nice folks are socialists, they stop thinking socialists are demons. True. Yeah. Like guys, one of the more right-leaning people that I've encountered on Twitch, a man by the name of Redneck, I got him to agree that we should slowly shift our economy over to worker co-ops. I got him to agree on decommodification, and he's a conservative. Now, these are things that I think that when we put these ideas forward and when we explain them and when we demystify them and when we invite others who are unfamiliar with these ideas into our tent, we can win. We can win on these ideas. Neither of your points is socialist if we go by definitions of deprivatization of capital. Worker co-ops are capitalist. No. Worker co-ops are socialist institutions that function under capitalism. Hello, Echoplex Media. Hi, everybody. Some would call you socialist, but you can convince many to support you on these non-socialist points if you don't call yourself a socialist. But, like, your woke stuff is insane. I don't know. I think it's pretty sane. This is a stick-up. Oh, no. Oh, no. Hello, everybody. I hope you're having a fantastic evening. Yes, and please do go check out Echoplex Media. They make some fantastic content. And... Wait, what am I supposed to check out? Real patriotism memes? I love it. This is great. Yeah, more stuff like this, please. More stuff like this. I like this a lot. But I mean, like, fundamentally, like, Battle of Cannae, like, no, like, if we adopted a primarily worker co-op society, it would be a socialist one. That is a socialist change in in the fundamental way that capital is distributed. The entire idea of Marxism, by the way, is that you take a look at how the power shifted from feudalism, where the nobility had power, to the bourgeois, which is basically the capitalists having power, the people who owned capital. And worker co-ops are essentially everyone at the worker co-op collectively owning the capital together. That is a shift to socialism. It's just a structure we already have, and many of us are already familiar with. It fundamentally changes what we are and what our economy is like. Because no longer are you having guys at the top making 300 million times what you are. Instead, it's people, that profit is getting equitably distributed across all of the workers, at least to some degree. I do not know how to say your name. I'm just going to say Flet. Thank you very much for the follow. I very much appreciate it. Hi, everybody. We've had a wild night. We proved that Abby Shapiro is secretly bisexual. We've watched an entire breakdown of how capitalism is anti-democracy. We've learned a whole lot tonight. We're having a really good time. See, I found several market socialists who call themselves socialists because they want worker co-ops, which they consider socialist, but which I consider by definition to be capitalist. Well, I would ask why you consider them capitalist. Again, my definition of socialism is worker control over the means of production, i.e. worker control over capital, and decommodification of a significant portion of the economy. Also, Star Slice, thank you for smashing that follow button. I appreciate the dickens out of you. Yeah, tuned into the Abbey. Hold up. We watched a bunch of Abby Shapiro videos, and she had a number of videos where she had this finger painted differently from her other fingers, and she films from a closet, and I don't know. The lady doth protest too much, I think, when it comes to heteronormativity. Yeah, socialism is workers controlling the means of production. That's literally what a worker co-op is. Oh yeah, she also doesn't like straight milk. True. True. True.
Hi. Hi. Big fan, Yanis. Nice to see you in person. And I hope you don't mind that I'll struggle to give you a short question instead of an essay.
So, and William of Orange, no, the nail polish doesn't mean you're gay. When you specifically color this nail, it's usually a sign that you're gay. Just saying. Just saying.
So basically, one angle that I kind of feel was missing from tonight's talk is the angle of class formations. So
no, I'm not saying earrings make you gay. I'm saying that there are trends in the bisexual and gay community, and that specific thing fits with the trend. Also, ramen, basically there is an element of profit sharing, definitely, but also there's an element of having agency over your workplace and having a say, via a democratic process in how your company is run. So yeah.
So the New Deal was born out of, I believe, about easily 50, 60 years of left-wing organizing among the industrial working classes who basically, as we would always say in our slogans, had their hands on the wheels. When they went on strike, they could stop production, stop the flow of profits, and so on and so on. And so by the time the Great Depression came, there was a crisis. There was a place for labor and the left at the bargaining table. I guess what I want to ask is, let's take neoliberalism out of kind of good faith and say there really was a change in the class formation that allowed them to just throw out Bretton Woods and say, we don't want to commit to this deal anymore. You don't have the power, effectively your bargaining terms, laborers, are not so good anymore. So then that...
No, a CEO owning the company is literally capitalism. That a CEO owning the company is a capitalist because he owns the capital. He, by definition, is the capitalist. No. I'm sorry. That's absolutely not correct.
That leaves us today. Where are we? Who does have their hands on the wheel? I mean, here we are, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Large portion of the population works in white-collar professions. Many of them are homeowners. In traditional, there aren't a lot of traditional industrial workers in this room. On the other hand, the traditional industrial workers in Ohio or wherever are losing their jobs quite rapidly due to mechanization and offshoring.
No, you're not pointing out a flaw. You're just pointing out a capitalist. Like Battle of Cannae, there's a distinction between capitalists and workers. The CEO is not a worker. The CEO is a capitalist.
So, who can put...
Okay, wait. Correction. There is, to a degree, a way in which a CEO is a worker, but largely the CEO is a capitalist who is being overpaid for the work that they do based on the profits of the company. There we go. Yeah, what Serious Twitch said. One worker owning a business and 100,000 other workers not owning it wouldn't be the workers owning the business. Exactly.
Put the worker's gun to the capitalist class's head anymore.
I've been streaming for 7.5 hours. You'll have to forgive me if I'm not.
But I have to
sharp.
to disagree with you on one thing.
And sorry to sound a bit tanky on you.
No, you're not saying no.
Fuck tankies.
It is the pertinent question, the one you asked. I don't have a splendid answer to it, I can assure you. But where I want to disagree with you is that in 1933 or 32, it was the labor movement that imposed its will using its power. There was no power. the 1929 the great crash and then the depression that followed completely depleted trade unions of any bargaining power. When you have a situation where you've got hordes of people outside the factory gates begging to be allowed into work at any wage, you don't have trade union power. So it was a political process that led, not a labor process, that led to the New Deal. And let's not forget that FDR was not a revolutionary leader, he was a patrician. Yeah, he was a bourgeois.
No, William of Orange. It's not people owning shares of a corporation, it is the workers owning the corporation. Workers owning the capital.
Even Keynes, I mean, think about Keynes. Keynes hated the workers. He loathed trade unions. The reason why he introduced Keynesian economics, his proposals, which included increasing wages and welfare states and fiscal spending, on fiscal stimulus and so on, was very simple. He wanted to preserve capital.
This is Yanis Varoufakis, a Greek economist. There we go. I don't know why I couldn't say that word. Sorry if there's miscommunication while I make my points. I'm arguing definitions, so give me a sec. Well, I mean, that's my point. I try and simplify socialism down to a very simple definition that everyone can understand, because a lot of people get hung up on this. Earlier, I went over the history of socialism and why it has come to mean so many different things. And I'm not inclined to do it again at the moment, but to kind of sum up, Stalin really fucked it up for everybody. And essentially, a lot of people have the impression that socialism is when a highly authoritarian leader takes power in a country and then uses that authoritarianism to centralize the economy and conduct state capitalism, which is not what socialism is. And so I simplify it down to two different things, which is worker control over the means of production, meaning all workers who contribute to the capital production collectively own that capital, and then decommodifying a significant portion of the economy.
Capitalism, and he understood that capitalism was not very good at preserving itself. That's.
Have you ever met workers with capital in socialist countries? Isn't it so you can only own capital if you are part of the party? Well, Infidel 072. I would argue that countries that call themselves socialists but don't have workers controlling the means of production aren't socialist. They're something else, usually authoritarian regimes with highly centralized planned economies. When socialism goes bad, it's rough. I'm just unsure of the downside when someone terrible gets into power and fucks it all up. Yeah, but you could say the same about a lot of things. By the way, guys, in case I need to clarify this, I'm pro-democracy. I'm pro-democracy in our government. I just want to inject our democracy into the workplace to counteract the tyranny of traditional private businesses. Do you consider LLCs owned by one person to be socialist? That's a good question. I'm not sure.
A very large part of the motivation of Roosevelt. It was not that he was being pushed by the industrial might of the labor unions.
Well,
so
Roosevelt
that
and
gives you a
both
bit
had to worry about
of hope.
communists.
Since that didn't happen then, maybe we don't need strong trade unions today. Today, I think that from a class formation point of view,
yeah, I'm not sure.
What worries me and what I think is should be the objective is how to organize the precariat, how to turn those who live a precarious existence, the Uberized workers, into a political force, because they now are falling through the cracks of society. They are like the lumpen proletariat used to be. They're disappearing. I mean, a person who works 18 hours a day in an Uber is not a
Capitalism, an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by the state. Is this a definition you agree with for capitalism? No, capitalism, I would say, is largely a system of economics whereby someone owns, like, one individual or a small group of individuals own capital, and workers have no privately own that capital. Yes. Let's see. Economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled, private owners for profit. Yeah, I mean, that's close enough. Yeah, sure. Banks, as well as any giant structure, should be broken up. They have too much influence and power.
Person. It's a lost soul. It's a moving, monument to misanthropy. So that for me is a major question. But okay, allow me just to be a little to shift towards something that may sound science fiction, but I don't think it is. We need to think innovatively about collective action. I do not believe that the revolution is going to come through trade unions in industrial sites simply because they are fading, unless the robots organize. And they do the revolution on our behalf. You never know. I've read a science fiction novel where the computer in the end organized the revolution. No, but let me give you an example. Today you have...
What's up with the call-ins tonight? I mean, so far only one call-in. Only one person called in with contentions about Black Lives Matter, and I feel like I resolved it pretty amicably and made really good points. I felt really good about the call-in that we had. Just a small BLM debate.
Millions of people who are being exploited by public utility companies that have been privatized and which are financialized. And they have already sold to financiers the next 20 years of the electricity bills that you will be paying. And as a result of this financialization, your bill is going up and up and up, completely disproportionately to the cost of producing electricity, water, whatever. What if we could work out which financial derivatives, which CDOs are packaging the bills in a particular neighborhood and another neighborhood and another neighborhood, and we organize through the internet so that we can have an electricity bill payment strike that is timed in such a way as to explode those CDOs and make them bankrupt. Now that's a form of collective action, which is using the financial instruments of the, this kind of network against it. We need to think beyond the, modern times Charlie Chaplin.
Thank you very much. Very interesting stuff.
Kalispera.
Kalispera.
That's all the Greek I know. So I originally tried to do a PhD on the topic you talked at length about the separation between political power and economic power, specifically about the European Union and how it sort of formalized this split between the political spheres no longer has to do anything with what the people want with economic organization. No one wanted to touch that one with the 10-foot pole, so I'm doing something else now, but it remains my passion. But so to keep the question reasonably short, what is the one change? What are the one...
I mean, I'd agree with you that Native Lives Matter lost Sue. I'm not sure if there would be much of a debate.
One of, I assume, the many changes you'd like to see in the structure of the European Union that could address this, if you could choose just one thing.
Right. Well, I'll be very brief in my response. We need to federate. Because there are only two choices here. Either we break it up, which many people want, even on the left, thinking that that recoiling into the bosom of the nation state is somehow going to allow them to create socialism in one country. Yeah, right. Yeah. Or we're going to have to create, a democratic union. Now, the problem is that with this crisis that we have, which is both economic and political and moral, if you want, we can't have a serious discussion about federation because we have centrifugal forces that are pulling us apart. So this is why our movement, you may have heard of a movement that I'm part of, DM25, we're proposing what we call a European New Deal. A New Deal in order to stabilize and to bring hope back so that we can have a discussion on how to federate.
Thank you very much.
I'm also going to ask a question about the European Union and about Greece and about the immigration problem, which
Uber is a
is
bitch-ass
all the
company.
more on
True.
everyone's
True.
mind because of what Trump
Also,
has
yes,
just
the taxi
done
industry is
with
terrible.
wiping out the
This is why we need to invest in public transit.
the agreement on the Iranian
Yep.
nuclear situation. I recently read that on the island of Lesbos, I believe, which is an island that receives a lot of the immigrants from the Middle East,
It's full of
Syria,
lesbians.
that Greeks were attacking the immigrants. And I read that, I have read for years now that conditions in the camps are terrible.
Yeah.
And some
Worker co-op is still capital, privately owned for the purpose of profit. Capitalism is private ownership, not a organizational structure. Wrong. It's not privately owned. It's owned by the workers that work there. That's the difference. The workers control the means of production in a worker co-op. That's all it means. That's all socialism means. Workers controlling the means of production, controlling the capital. Like, you understand that in order to be a capitalist, you have to own the capital. Like, a select small group of people or a single person owns the capital. The workers don't own the capital. That's the big difference of socialism. In socialism, the workers own the capital. It doesn't mean all workers everywhere own the same capital, but the workers who work in that one factory, for example, collectively own the factory.
something that I have wondered about.
No, because we've had markets outside of capitalism. Exchanging goods occurs outside of capitalism. It's not the markets and capitalism do not go hand in hand. Markets exist in other forms of economic activity. Capitalism has only been around for like 400 or so years. So we're talking about corporatism? No, I'm an advocate for market socialism. And so what that means is I advocate for a transition to a worker co-op economy. And I also advocate for decommodifying the goods and services that we need in order to survive in a modern society. In market socialism, what percentage of the company do the workers own? I mean, collectively, they own 100% of it. Unless you need like a loan, then I suppose like there's probably like an agent representing the investment on like the board of directors, but collectively the workers own the company. How much each worker owns, that depends on how large the worker co-op is, you know?
For years is why is it the immigrants from the Middle East
okay,
and
Night
North
Sister.
Africa are coming to the
Night Sister, I'm an advocate. I'm here to educate and I'm here to talk about this shit all day long. Doesn't that disincentivize the capitalist to invest in the company in the first place? Yes, that is why worker co-ops typically have a hard time finding finance. This is why one of the primary things I advocate for is setting up federal loan systems that would go to worker co-ops. Can workers not own private things now? Forgive me, but wouldn't the definition of capitalism you just gave being owned by an individual or small group fit perfectly with the small group of workers owning a company? No, because the workers are the ones who generate the profit of the company. The workers, McDonald's wouldn't make money if the workers weren't working there. So the point of the workers owning the means of production is that all workers would benefit from the profit of the company. So you're all equally invested. You all have some degree of compensation that is related to the success of the company, and you have some degree of control over your working conditions through a democratic process. This is not how typical companies run. This is not anywhere close to that. But you can still own private goods, like personal property is still yours. It's just that you can't, as an individual, own capital. Like if you're starting a business, you don't own the capital. Anyone who comes onto the business shares the capital with you. It becomes a worker co-op. If that's the case, I would assume you would not want startups to have worker co-op system, since it is inherently a high-risk environment to operate in. Actually, worker co-ops tend to have a higher rate of survival. People working at worker co-ops tend to be more motivated, happier, and better compensated than in typical private companies. So they tend to be more productive for your local economy too. So that's why I kind of advocate for the government stepping in to provide these loans. Yeah, I think incentivizing the creation of these things is only a good thing for society.
South of Europe, the poorest part of Europe. And why is it that there is not some common effort? Perhaps this is a very naive question.
At this point, I'm really not sure how to make the point that workers can be the workers and own part of the company. I mean, the two things aren't mutually exclusive. They can work for the company and also own the company. That's my point. That's the goal of socialism, to have the workers collectively own the company. That's not what happens in private companies under capitalism.
But some common effort to subsidize countries like Greece, which is in terrible economic straits.
Taco Cat, thank you very much for clarifying that.
Does an economy overcome that? I mean, and how does that play out? $8 trillion in interest per year, if that's...
No, it's not 8 trillion per year.
It's not?
No.
Okay.
No.
Exactly, OmniSlap, exactly. That's my position. You slowly transition from private business to worker co-ops.
No. But what is your general concern? That we pay too much for what? For the debt?
Who would be responsible for paying the government loan, say the company fails? I mean, probably the government. Like, yeah. I just think that it is a better investment than the government investing in private companies, which it already does. So I think the argument should be that we should prioritize investing in worker co-ops over private companies.
No, I'm talking about the wars, just the wars.
Yeah.
All right, let me change.
Maybe it's 8 billion, but not 8 trillion.
Okay, then my figures are wrong.
3 zeros is okay.
Okay.
Well, look...
Perpetuo, thank you very...
the United States of America, as Eisenhower told you in the 1950s and warned you,
I appreciate it.
is predicated upon, but a very interesting industrial...
Exactly, Raman. We also bail the shit out of private companies. And my position is that we should take a stance, and when we do bail out these private companies, we should transition them into worker co-ops. They're better for our economy. They're better for our system. They are, more equitably distributing the profits of their operation. Yeah, I think this is incredibly good for all of us, and it would contribute more to our government. So it's a win-win-win.
Policy. You don't have a formal industrial policy. You have something called the military-industrial complex. And the military-industrial complex is essential for American capitalism in the way that the American capitalism has been created.
Yep.
So
he's right, you know.
The reason why Missouri and Massachusetts can be in the same union, and you don't have the same problems that we have between Greece and Germany. It's because you have what I call a surplus recycling mechanism. You have food stamps, you have social security, and that means that money that is taxed in the surplus states is transferred to the deficit states, and that keeps a degree of balance. But the most important part of your surplus recycling mechanism is a military-industrial complex. So when Boeing gets a contract to build the new generation of fighter jets,
the entire thing in the United States.
Quadrillions, yeah?
Banks. We
The
bailed out
Pentagon
the
says to them, yeah,
banks.
but you're going to have to build the engine in a new site in Missouri, in the deficit places. The plane.
Capitalism is a far broader definition than we think of a modern company as, a definition that you agreed with that perfectly fits with worker co-ops. No, it doesn't. I cannot. Okay, here I actually have an image. Okay, to show you how the difference. Okay, we're gonna go take a look at this difference. All right. Let's see here. Where did I save it? It's up here. Okay. Look at my shitty drawing, okay? This is capitalism. It's a highly hierarchical system. None of these people have any investment in the system. They are paid a wage. They don't have, they can't buy or own any part of this company. They are just workers, paid a wage, okay? They have no control over their working environment. Their working environment is largely controlled via a totalitarian system by someone who is their boss. And that boss is controlled by another boss, and that boss is controlled by another boss, who's controlled by either one boss up here or a small board of directors who represent look, so you have this small group of people that owns this entire company, whereas in socialism you have every worker collectively owning the business. Now you can, yes, the butthole diagram. Now you can have a hierarchy within this, and I have brought that up on stream before. For example, this is a way you can have a hierarchy in it. Going back to the definition of capitalism we both agreed to is defined as privately owned. The organizational structure is never mentioned. But that's the point. Under socialism, workers own the means of production. Workers own the means of production. Not the workers share the means of production or whatever the fuck. No, the workers own it. That's the point. They own it. They have control over the means of production. Unless you're trying to argue that Marx was a capitalist, and you're saying Karl Marx was secretly a capitalist, which I think you would be hard-pressed to convince anyone of, you're just blatantly wrong in this regard. But, again, when the workers, all of these workers, collectively own the company, that's very different from just the leadership board owning the company. That's very different. Everyone who works at this company collectively owns it, regardless of where they are in this hierarchy. And collectively, they're able to make decisions via a democratic process that become the mandate of the company. So, again, I don't understand how you can't... I don't understand where your disconnect is here. Please help me understand. You understand that, if you take out... Oh, okay. If you take out... Wait, how can I do this? Okay, here we go. We're gonna edit. All right. If you take out... Oops. Aspect ratio. Give me free form. There we go. Okay, if you take out the workers owning this, it's a traditional company structure. Ignore this line. It's a traditional company structure. The leadership board collectively owns the company. Okay, well then I guess Battle of Cannae. You think that socialism and communism are capitalist, which they're not. But I guess if you're twisting that definition to mean that, then I guess socialists and communists are capitalist. I think you should break the news to the world. A legendary discovery. But my point is, Under a traditional model, this small group of people owns the labor of all of these people. Under a socialist system, the workers all collectively own their labor and the profits thereof. This is fundamentally a different thing. Mao and Hitler were not socialists, no. Also, Archangel Decab, I don't think Night Sister's a bad actor. I think she was genuinely asking. But yeah, Night Sister, no, neither of those people were socialists. Yeah, I would like to own my own labor rather than being paid a fraction of it in a wage. I don't know about you. That's very different than how capitalism works. I guess to each their own. No, I mean, like, socialism literally is not what the Nazis did. It's not what Hitler did. It's not what Mao did. We may be very different politically and socially. I mean, I disagree with your definitions, I guess, but we can agree to disagree. I mean, wait, from what you've heard of me so far, do you think that I'm a Nazi or a Maoist? Because I'm a socialist. So am I a Nazi? Yeah, exactly. So I'm telling you, socialists do not align with Nazis or Maoists. Oh yeah, I mean, handsomest robot. Like, there's no reason that we shouldn't collectively own pharmaceutical companies. Like, most of the funding of pharmaceuticals comes from the government. Yeah. Anyway, again, this is capitalist because it's owned by a small minority of capitalists. You know, the small as differentiated from workers. But you got called a Nazi for saying positive words about Trump. Well, I mean, Trump is a fascist, so, I mean, I can see why someone might mistake you for one. Battle of Cannae. No. No. You understand the difference of capitalists owning something versus workers owning something, right? Do you know what a capitalist is? Do you know what the difference between a capitalist and a worker is, Battle of Cannae? Because if you don't, then you don't understand capitalism. But Night Sister, if you want to learn a little bit about fascism, we have some handy links there that Nightbot posted. Umberto Eco's 14 Points of Fascism, and his longer essay, Fascism. It goes into more detail about fascist ideology, and it might be helpful for you. I don't know. Going by your own words, that workers and privately owning something are not mutually exclusive. They can be both. Yes. In socialism, when it comes to capitalism, workers and capitalists are fundamentally different things. Again, if you don't understand this, you don't understand capitalism. A capitalist is someone who owns capital. Under capitalism. Under socialism, the workers own capital. This is the fundamental difference. It all has to do with ownership. That's it. That's it. It only has to do with ownership. It's pretty easy. Where in the definition of capitalism we agreed to does it... Battle of Cannae, are you just trying to do like a gotcha where you're pretending not to understand what capitalism is because like we omitted it from the original we omitted like to define capitalist versus worker in the original definition? Because if so, it's like a really shitty argument and it's just kind of like semantic rather than actually dealing with the meat of this issue. And I think anyone who's like witnessing our back and forth can really tell where I'm standing and understands what I'm trying to say. I would like to hear if there's anyone else in chat who doesn't understand what I'm trying to say so I can clarify it to them. No, worker co-ops function under capitalism. But if we had an economic model primarily made up of worker co-ops, it would cease to be capitalist. It would instead be socialist. That's the point. That's the entire fucking point. Okay, I'm glad Star Slice is at least following. You're a smart cookie, Star Slice, and I appreciate you, okay? Capitalist. Socialist. Capitalist. Socialist. Capitalist. Socialist. Anyway, I feel like I've made my point. Especially with this immaculate drawing. That's on par with the greatest works of art in the history of art. Let's finish this fucking video.
The spare parts of this and that over there and so on. So to keep this going, you need some wars. I'm not proposing that this is how it should be. I'm just describing it. So in 1991, the Pentagon and the Treasury Department in this country had a major headache. The Cold War had finished. So they could no longer pass through Congress on the basis of national security the bills that were necessary in order to keep replenishing the cruise and Pershing missiles.
That's
so they had to,
help. Well,
to
Miss
clear
Dinosaur,
the stock.
I'm really glad
so
my
you had the first war in Iraq. And they cleared, remember the war had finished and they were going into the middle of the desert and firing all the cruise and Pershing missiles to get rid of them so that they could order new ones in order to maintain. So capitalism is just a very rational system because it's a very simple reason why it's so irrational, because it has a productive capacity, a capacity to produce, which far exceeds its capacity to consume. So something has to make up this difference. And war is the result, not just lack of democracy.
Hi, thank you for tonight. Question for you. If we, theoretically, go back to 2015, you're now in charge instead of Cyprus, in charge of Greece. Faced with harsh austerity versus Grexit, what political path would you have chosen?
Well, you know the answer. That's why I'm here. I'm not in the ministry. Why am I not in the ministry? No. Why did I resign? Because we had an agreement. We had a very simple agreement. And this is the only reason why I accepted the finance ministry and to run in the election. We had an agreement that there were three possible outcomes. I'll put it succinctly. Three possible outcomes. One was continuing debt bondage in the euro, which is what has been happening since 2010. For me, that was the worst possible outcome. Another outcome was Grexit, for Greece to be chucked out of the Eurozone or to choose to get out. This came with substantial costs, and it was never my proposal. But I always considered it to be better than perpetual debt bondage in the euro. When people say, but the euro is a strong currency, I say, yeah, well, if you're a pauper and you live under a bridge in New York, you have $1 in your pocket, it doesn't mean you have a strong currency. You have one bloody dollar in your pocket, yeah? It doesn't help much.
And again, Battle of Cannae, I think this comes down to the fundamental misunderstanding that only things with like markets and capitalism go hand in hand. They don't. You can have a market in a non-capitalist system. If the issue to you is branding, like, feel free to call it. We can rebrand it as libertarian capitalism. Okay, we can call it libertarian capitalism, and that's fine with me. But as long as we have the basic understanding that it is a socialist system, and I'm going to keep calling myself socialist, but you can fight the battle for libertarian capitalism. Okay.
And then the first best, my ideal solution would be debt restructuring within the euro that would allow us to stay in the euro in a sustainable way and to end the Great Depression. So the point I was making was, no bluffing. We say to them, we don't want to get out of the euro, but we need a debt restructure and we need the end of austerity for Greece to remain sustainable within the euro.
Guys, I have to leave this alone. I have to leave it alone. I can't keep engaging with Battle of Cannae on this. We can call it libertarian capitalism if we want, but if we're like, again, Battle of Cannae, if we're really going with your definition of what capitalism is, then literally, I guess, like, feudalism was capitalist to you, which is wild. Just absolutely wild.
And that's what we want. And let's sit down and we will compromise. I did say to Obama when he said to him, but Yanis, you have to compromise. I compromised. I said, I dream of compromise. But I'm never going to be compromised. There's a fundamental difference between the two. Okay? And we say to them that we are not going to accept that we are not putting our signature on another loan agreement that extends and pretends our bankruptcy into the future. So shoot us, kill us, get us out of the euro. We don't want to get out of the euro, but we consider getting out of the euro to be a lesser evil than staying under conditions of debt. So Tsipras supposedly agreed with me, and not only agreed with me, but considered it to be more right-wing than him, and more ready to compromise. And he had some reasons. Not that he was right, but you'll be very interested to hear that one of the people that worked with me during this period in creating the plan and the narrative against the Troika and the International Monetary Fund was somebody called Larry Summers, who was actually very good, because he understood that what was happening in Greece reflected very quickly and immediately in the European macroeconomic stance, which was detrimental to the interests of the United States. So we worked together with Larry Summers, and when we met, I said, I'm very glad you haven't read my last book. And he said, why? I said, because I referred to it to you on a number of occasions in the same book as a Prince of Darkness. And he said, well, at least you called me Prince. I've been called worse. So it's clear. Yeah.
The two organizations I like to follow side by side, the DM25 movement and 6 Degrees of Citizen Space in Canada with John Ralston Saul. And I just really enjoyed John Ralston Saul's book, The Collapse of Globalism. And he describes this idea of a positive form of nationalism that we haven't explored. We think of nationalism as negative, and we often only see negative forms based on exclusion. But our movements like DM25, imagining and exploring, possibly hijacking and displacing hate with positive forms of nationalism that are centered around inclusion and sort of collective missions like reducing inequality that can capture a lot of the people that are displaced in this country, the Trump voters that might not be racist, that just wanted a better deal. And they really fall in with the flag. When someone waves the flag, they're easy to be manipulated. They just feel that they must go with it. But now in this country, when you see 2 American flags on the back of a pickup truck, that's kind of a hate.
Oh, Star Slice? No, Uber has huge problems. Basically, the entire business model of Uber was essentially to undermine taxi services and run them out of business. And by running them out of business, be able to then come in and dominate the market completely. And once they dominated the market, they would jack up the prices. This is a common tactic when it comes to a lot of other things, like When Walmart goes into a small town, it typically has the lowest prices around to run every other competing business out of the market, and then they jack up the prices as soon as they have no competition. So, oh yeah, no, Uber's losing like incredible amounts of money, historic amounts of money. Like Uber runs at a massive, massive loss. Its investors were largely counting on Uber being able to undermine the native markets and take them over, and then jack up their prices. It's also why like they initially were paying their workers very well, and then over time they've slowly like cut the amount that they pay their workers more and more and more until now it's like an extremely shitty job. Yeah, they were also banking on like the transition to self-driving cars, which hasn't happened yet.
Hate symbol. You know, the left, progressive people that enjoy inclusion have maybe allowed the flag to get stolen from them. But then at the same time, you know, we need to integrate nationalism, possibly a new form, with ideas
self-driving
like
cars aren't safe yet.
federation.
They're not safe
You know,
yet.
to gain more power back into the political sphere against, you know, the financial sphere.
Well, let me say that I get your drift. I grew up in a culture where the left answered this question of yours a long time ago by making a distinction not between positive and negative nationalism, but between nationalism and patriotism. Our line was always, we're patriots, and the difference between a patriot and a nationalist, the patriot loves his country, and the nationalist thinks that his country has the right to steamroll over every other country. And I think that is a good way of resolving it. And also, but making this more contemporary, I think we have to appropriate the slogan, I want my country back. I think we should take this and say, yes, I want my city back. I want my neighborhood back. I want control over my city, my municipality, my state, my country. But the only way to get my country back is if others get their countries back as well. And if we all work together and we understand that to get our countries back, we need to resolve problems such as low quality jobs, low levels of investment in
speaking to my soul
in the
right
green
now.
transition that the planet needs, climate change and so on. That we need to fight poverty. And it is impossible to fight poverty in one country when it's rising in other countries. If you think that you can do that, you are deluding yourself. So in effect, to embed patriotism in a narrative which sees the major problems that society faces, like poverty, low investment, problems with the health service and so on, as we see climate change.
Evelyn Tremble 67, thank you very much for hitting that
What I mean by
follow
that is
button.
climate change requires local action, that we do things here in Boston, that we do things in Massachusetts, in the United States, but we have to act globally as well. And we need to cooperate. Because resolving poverty, as I said, can only happen at, the Bretton Woods system is a good example. Poverty fell everywhere
Lasso.
throughout the global system of the Bretton Woods. Inequality shrunk everywhere.
We need to
It
do
couldn't
right by your
rise in
people
one
too.
place massively and fall in another. So we have to combine love of country, of neighborhood, of community, patriotism, with a transnationalism and internationalism that allows us to claim our own countries back.
A funny multinational question that I would love to hear answered from you. In the book, John Ralston Saul describes this concept where a lot of the trade that we have is fictitious. It is multinationals trading with themselves.
Yeah, of course.
And can you
It's called
describe-
limit pricing.
Well, now, you know, we were just creating these tariffs that might not really get to the root of the issue. We were punishing
Omnius Lab, I think you make a really good point. My one clarification is that I am for doing whatever we need to do in order to get our policies passed, and if adopting patriotic rhetoric or rhetorical flourishes or aesthetic is going to help us, I think that maybe that's something we should do. I think that might be something we should do in order to gain power, you know? I'm a pragmatist, and I don't know. I think there's nothing wrong with appropriating some of the things that the right uses that we can use for ourselves, you know? Yeah, internationalism is great. I would probably just start more with, you know, a lot, like if we were going to give a rally, right? We should probably start it off with a lot of the patriotism, you know? And then maybe add in some of that international flair at the end, you know? Exactly, Miss Dinosaur. Oh my gosh, CTV got so mad the other day when I brought up veterans. And he started like, well, you know, I think we should decommodify housing for our veterans. I'm like, yeah, but like maybe we should decommodify it for everyone though, if it's a good thing for our veterans. He got so upset. Because it's true.
Multinationals. We weren't punishing another nation. We were punishing multinationals that straddle two nations. And that not a lot of people in this country know how to think of these concepts and think of...
Well, I have a better way of punishing the multinationals. How about...
Lady Raincloud, thank you so much for the 5 Tier 1 community subs. That's so nice of you. Thank you so much. You're awesome. Thank you very much. And Bath Salts 1, thank you very much for hitting that follow button.
Making the IRS do its job. Because if you go to Venezuela, bad example, if you go to Italy and make some money,
everyone Peppo hands for Lady
you get
Raincloud.
taxed here.
Go, go, go.
You are taxed by the IRS on your global income. You cannot...
Oh, Battle of Kane, thank you very much for hitting that follow button. Have a good one.
Say, I made $10,000 in Napoli, and therefore that's none of your business, taxman or woman. No, you get taxed on your global income in the United States, unless you're a corporation. And then you don't get taxed at all for the money you stash away all over the world. How about having the IRS do its job, instead of introducing tariffs that in the end have a detrimental effect on all of us?
The IRS can't
Yes, it can.
that.
Yes, of course
They
it
can
can.
invent the
Of course you can.
itself?
No. They need their marching orders from Congress. They need the politicians to say to them, you're going to treat... Look, the Supreme Court, in its infinite idiocy, decided that corporations and and individuals will be treated the same when it comes to super PACs and all that, right?
Yeah.
Well, why not also decide that corporations and individuals will be treated the same tax-wise?
This is like the ultimate troll face. What a king. What an absolute king over here. What an absolute monarch this man is. I'm for this. Yes. Treat corporations and people the same if our speech is the same. Fuck yeah.
Okay, I remember a beautiful poster I saw in Texas saying that...
I like it.
No, okay.
We're going to take the last question.
I believe that corporations have human rights when I see one of them being hanged. That was Texas for you.
Yeah, in the briefest and broadest of strokes,
Well, because bath salts, we treat them the same right now when it comes to super PACs and like political advocacy. Like the Citizens United decision was essentially saying that corporations have the ability to exercise free speech via money and super PACs. So what he's saying is if we have the authority to give corporations equal footing with citizens on this side, then we should have the authority to tax them both the same.
Post-capitalistic world that you envision, what does the credit system look like, and how does it achieve equilibrium with the sovereignty of states?
Okay, how long do we have? No, but let me put it simply. If we have a system where private property is maintained over goods and services and things that give you happiness, but not over productive processes, and productive processes belong to those that work them, that are part of it, then you simply do not.
Irrelevant. They should both pay proportionally the same. If we tax corporations the way we tax people, tax them both the same rate.
Have a credit system. You don't need one at all.
Oh, Lady Raincloud, send the link to Ahmad.
And your justification for that is?
That credit is work them. Let me put it simply. If we have a system where private property is maintained over goods and services and things that give you happiness, but not over productive processes, and productive processes belong to those that work them, that are part of it, then you simply do not have a credit system. You don't need one at all.
And your justification for that is?
That credit is only necessary when you've got an asymmetrical distribution of property rights over means of production.
So you wouldn't say
if you and I have a cooperative, if you and I have a
cycles?
cooperative, if we own a business together, we have a partnership, then I'm never going to be in your debt or you in my debt. We're going to be producing together, and we're going to be sharing the profits that we make, the economic rents.
What about investors?
Well, there will be no investors.
What about the other parts?
Because investors exist only because you have an asymmetrical distribution of wealth.
And so back
if you didn't have asymmetrical distribution, but look, this is going to be the topic of my next book. I have not written it yet.
I'm actually very fascinated by what his answer would be. Does anyone know if does anyone know if his next book is out? Because I would love to read it. Sounds very fascinating.
So I'll see you in 2 years.
This was a fantastic talk, and I very much enjoyed it. Absolutely fantastic. All right, you guys can check it out too, okay? Now, as for me, I've been streaming for almost 8.5 hours now. I'm extremely tired. I'm gonna go eat some food and probably go to sleep. Maybe. I'll be back on Monday though. I stream every weeknight, people. And thank you, Cowtool, for following on this stream. Thank you very much. Serious Twitch, thank you also very much. I appreciate all of you, and anyone who hasn't hit that follow button yet, please do if you feel so inclined, if you've enjoyed this content.